Chapter 384. In the Manor's exhibition hall, the owner of the manor, the organizer of this private exhibition, was cheerfully introducing his works to the crowd. Everyone in the industry commented that he was too materialistic, but he was still sought after by the market. He had some ability and was considered a veteran in the art circle. Will looked at the paintings and calculated the time. Although he didn't like this person's paintings, he had to admit that his painting techniques were worth learning. Of course, in comparison, he was more willing to bring curly hair out to nurture his inspiration. That was what he desired the most. Many times, he felt that he was very close to starting his brush, but when he actually picked it up, he was still at a loss. After studying the paintings in the exhibition hall, Will looked at the time. Only half an hour had passed, and he still had to continue listening to the manor owner's exaggerated boasting. This was simply mental pollution. Will didn't continue listening. Instead, he went upstairs alone to look at the manor owner's private collection. The manor owner loved to show off. Besides his own works, he would also display a portion of his collection, all of which were art treasures. There were fewer people upstairs, so it was quieter. Will planned to kill time here and leave with the dog after an hour. As he was looking, he suddenly heard a loud bang. His head felt numb. Then, a few beams of light shot up, and the huge paintings hanging in the exhibition hall were instantly set ablaze. This sudden turn of events made some people panic. The exhibition hall was instantly thrown into chaos. Some people fled, some people looked for Will. Will was a genius when it came to painting, but he was trash in other aspects, such as his ability to escape. When the turn of events happened, at a time like this where every second was a life wasted, Will was still standing there in a daze. He only moved when other people who were also looking at the exhibits reminded him. His first reaction was to run after the people in front of him. He completely forgot where the exit was. In the chaotic exhibition hall, the usually refined and elegant people didn't care about anything else when their lives were threatened. All they cared about was running for their lives. Will, this useless artist who didn't exercise, was easily pushed aside and knocked down by the people behind him like a weak chicken. He fell to the ground and couldn't get up. His leg was sprained. There weren't many people upstairs. In the blink of an eye, only Will was left. The intelligent fire control system had become a decoration. His personal terminal had also malfunctioned. Will had never imagined that he would encounter such a thing. He had never been mentally prepared and had been caught off guard. Only when one reached that point could one understand what true despair was. As he coughed, his throat felt like it was stuck by something sharp. His breathing became more and more difficult, and his cries for help couldn't drown out the noise around him. He squinted his eyes in discomfort. In his narrow field of vision, he saw a distorted world in the light of the fire. A thick cloud of smoke spread in his direction like a terrifying monster. For Will, who was used to thinking that painting was more important than anything else, at this moment, his mind was filled with endless inspiration. His strongest thought was actually about painting. As Will's thoughts drifted into the chaos of running for his life, inspiration, and drawing, the back of his hand was touched by a wet nose. Woof woof woof. Will's muddled mind cleared up a little, and he turned his head to look. Curly hair nudged Will's arm with his nose again. Woof 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 woof. Will didn't think about why Curly Hair, who should have been locked up in a cage, was here. At this moment, his heart was filled with gratitude, regret, and boundless regret. Curly Hair had actually found this place before the bodyguards. Oh right, there was still the painting. The goal he had set for himself during his advanced studies had yet to be accomplished. Thinking of this, Will tossed aside all the distracting thoughts in his mind. Hurry up and get out. Cough cough cough. Just saying a few words was incomparably difficult. Curly Hair barked a few times and bit on Will's sleeve, wanting to pull it out. Rip! His sleeve was torn to shreds. Will was even more moved. You run. Cough cough cough, to find someone. You can't drag me. Before Will could finish speaking, Curly Hair gave up on pulling on his sleeve and ran off with Will's collar in his mouth. It was no different from a small twig on a stroll. Will, who was being dragged easily. Boom! A row of display racks came crashing down, right where Will had been lying. He looked up at the rapidly receding ceiling, and the sound of objects collapsing could be heard continuously. Not far away, there were even dense sparks flying about. In that instant Will finally understood. When Curly Hair dragged Will to the staircase, the bodyguards who had rushed into the exhibition hall in search of Will heard the barking of dogs and hurriedly put a breathing mask on Will before carrying him out of the exit. Curly Hair followed them out together. Outside the exhibition hall, paramedics had already rushed over to treat the injured. Will, who was being carried out of the exhibition hall, felt his surroundings cool down. It wasn't as scorching as before, and the lighting had also become much brighter. He could faintly hear the barking of dogs and the shrieks of an unknown lady not far away. When they reached a safe place, the bodyguard put Will down. Seeing Will's dazed appearance, he thought worriedly, "Will he be scared silly?" "Sir, Mr. Will Jr." the bodyguard called out. Will, who had been immersed in his own thoughts, was called back to his senses. He raised his hand to indicate that he was fine before continuing to immerse himself in his thoughts. He even muttered, "Wrong? I was wrong before." Seeing Will like this, the bodyguard became even more worried. "It's over. Looks like he's scared silly. Hurry and inform Mr. Will Sr." The bodyguard turned on a video call. When Mr. Will Sr., who had been participating in other activities, heard about what had happened, he was so shocked that his face turned pale. He only calmed down when he heard that Will's life was in no danger. At this moment, Will was in a rather sorry state. His entire body was covered in soot, and his hair smelled burnt. One of his sleeves had been torn, and his eyes were unfocused. Seeing this situation, Will Sr. wasn't in the mood to participate in any activities. He hurriedly dropped what he was doing and rushed over. At the same time, he arranged for private medical personnel and even more bodyguards to rush over. He had even made an appointment with a psychiatrist. How big of a psychological trauma would it be to suddenly encounter such an incident? At this moment, ambulances, fire trucks, and police cars gathered at this manor far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. The only good news was that up until now, no one had died. Even the dogs locked up in the designated area were fine. It was just that those dogs had all escaped, and a portion of the people were busy catching them. Curly Hair, this dog worth 200 million, didn't need Will to say anything. The bodyguards had personally carried him away. Watching the bodyguards bring Will away, some people who had come to the exhibition gathered together. They had been very afraid when the incident had happened, but they weren't afraid now that they had escaped. They were still very curious about the news. "I heard that Will was dragged out of the exhibition hall by that dog he brought?" someone said. "Wasn't it brought out by the bodyguards?" Someone beside them was astonished. "I know. I just heard from one of the bodyguards that Will was first found by the dog." The bodyguards heard the dogs barking before finding Will and bringing him out of the exhibition hall. Another person interrupted. "Sigh, I really didn't expect that such a small dog could actually drag an adult. Explosive strength? Otherwise, why would you say it's a dog worth 200 million? I don't know if the dog's owner has insured it. I saw that its fur was curled up by the fire just now." "No, its fur is naturally curly. I saw that it was quite spirited when it came out, so it shouldn't be injured. Otherwise, how much money would we have to pay?" "Will didn't leave the dog at the designated area?" "You still don't know?" "Someone made a hole in the dog cage at the designated area, and the dogs all escaped." Someone else joined in the discussion. "What? There's such a thing? I was wondering why I saw a dog running outside just now. Who did it? Could it be that they wanted to steal the dog?" "I don't know. I heard that the surveillance cameras were destroyed. The one who broke the cage should have been some kind of special pliers or something that could easily cut the metal bars of the cage." "Let's not talk about the dog first. What exactly happened this time? What else could it be? The manor owner offended someone and is being retaliated against. We are suffering because of the hatred he drew. What kind of rubbish is this?" Will didn't know what had happened at the manor. After leaving the manor, he had been sent to a hospital ward. He was lost in his own thoughts and was slow to respond to the doctor's questions. He looked like he was in a daze, and he didn't know what he was saying. When the doctors finished their examination, Will Sr. and his wife arrived. Seeing their son lying on the hospital bed in such a pitiful state, their hearts ached so much that their eyes turned red. When they heard the doctor say that Will's mental state wasn't right, Will Sr. and his wife were even more heartbroken. Indeed, this child had been scared silly. They didn't know when the psychological trauma would disappear. If they had known, they wouldn't have forced him to participate in this lousy exhibition. But before Will Sr. and his wife could say anything, Will raised his hand with great difficulty to a bodyguard beside him. His eyes seemed to emit an unprecedented glow. "Help me up. I want to draw." Then, Will's wishes were forcefully suppressed by his father. "Still want to draw at this time? Draw my ass. Don't even think about touching a brush before you recover." Before Mr. Will Sr. reached the hospital, he had sent someone to inform Feng Zhao. After all, that dog was worth 200 million. It was better to inform the owner of such a valuable item. When Feng Zhao received the news, he hurriedly applied for leave from his team and rushed over. Feng Zhao had not expected that Will would actually encounter such a situation when he had only brought Curly Hair to a private exhibition. Not long after Will Sr. and his wife arrived at the hospital, Feng Zhao also arrived. Will Sr. shook Feng Zhao's hand and thanked him profusely. He had already heard that if not for Curly Hair's barks, the bodyguards wouldn't have been able to find Will so quickly. It was very likely that Will would have been buried in the exhibition hall. However, Curly Hair hadn't cooperated with the examination and hadn't allowed the vet to approach. Curly Hair had been taken care of very well. The dust on his body had been cleaned, and it was impossible to tell that he had experienced an accident. When Feng Zhao saw him, Curly Hair was gnawing on a bone. Clearly, Curly Hair hadn't been affected by the accident at all. His appetite was very good, and when he saw Feng Zhao, he wagged his tail happily and whined coquettishly. As Will's life-saving dog, Will Sr. and his wife looked at Curly Hair lovingly and gratefully, as if they were looking at a glowing little angel. Feng Zhao brought the glowing little angel out of the hospital and back to Huang Art's dormitory for advanced studies. Chapter 385. Usually, when Curly Hair didn't allow a checkup, he must have done something. Thus, Feng Zhao gave Curly Hair a checkup after bringing him back. Curly Hair didn't have any external injuries. He hadn't even lost a strand of hair when he walked out of the exhibition hall. Others thought that Curly Hair had been lucky and hadn't been injured by falling objects, but Feng Zhao knew that wasn't necessarily the case. When he plucked out the metal shavings from between Curly Hair's teeth, Feng Zhao knew that the matter wasn't that simple. Feng Zhao had already heard from others about what had happened at the manor. He also knew that the cages where the dogs were kept had all been cut and that the culprit hadn't been found yet. Feng Zhao sighed. "Where are you injured?" Curly Hair raised a front paw. Feng Zhao pinched the paw and searched carefully for a while before he found a small scratch on the paw. The skin was not broken, and it would have healed if he had waited a little longer. As for the metal shavings stuck between Curly Hair's teeth, the edges were already showing signs of melting. Even if he hadn't plucked them out, they would have been digested. After cleaning up the metal shavings, Feng Zhao rubbed some ointment on Curly Hair's paw. "All right, go play somewhere else." Feng Zhao wanted to find out more information. He needed to know more details about the scene. Curly Hair ran off to play games after getting permission. Feng Zhao, on the other hand, understood some things through his status as the dog's owner and a good friend of Mr. Will Jr. The police were rather efficient. Based on the clues they had and the efforts of those furious artists and entrepreneurs, they found the culprit. The incident at the exhibition hall was indeed a deliberate act of revenge. The mastermind behind it had already been apprehended. The mastermind was an antique dealer who had an old grudge against the manor owner. Not long ago, the manor owner had used some underhanded means to snatch a piece of art from the antique dealer, so the antique dealer now hated him. The manor owner's personal exhibition had been advertised a long time ago, so the antique dealer had set his sights on it. According to the antique dealer, he had destroyed the manor owner's collection for revenge. He had never intended to kill anyone. The location of the bomb and the fire had been carefully considered. As long as one wasn't physically crippled or unlucky, there would be plenty of time for the attendees to come out. However, there really was someone who was physically useless, had a unique brain circuit, and was unlucky. This time, he sprained his ankle and injured himself. Many people were dumbfounded when they saw Will being sent to the hospital. In the police station, the furious owner of the manor and the gloomy Mr. Antique were quarreling for nearly half an hour. The manor lord: "You're insane." The antique dealer: "You're treacherous." The owner of the manor: "You are extremely vicious and evil. Sinister and cunning. Bribing the people in my manor to coordinate from the inside and outside. On one hand, you destroyed my collection, and on the other hand, you plotted to steal my dog." The antique merchant's gloomy face was like a storm. "You're slandering me. I'm fucking allergic to dogs. The policeman on the side saw that the two of them didn't get to the point, so he interrupted. Who tampered with the surveillance cameras in the place where the dogs were placed and the warehouses next to it? The antique dealer was furious. I told you. I'll admit to everything else. But the warehouse surveillance has nothing to do with me. I'm innocent. Perhaps it was someone from their manor who wanted to take advantage of the situation. If the owner of the manor is such a greedy dog, how can the people in the manor be any better? When the owner of the manor heard that the other party didn't forget to pour black water on him even at this point, he slammed the table and stood up. You're still quibbling. Were you the one who blew up the exhibition hall? Were you the one who got someone to start the fire? I admit to that. If you weren't the one who did it, who else could it be? The one who stole the dog must be you. Stealing the dog to sell for money. There was even a dog worth 200 million locked up in there. The antique dealer rushed over and wanted to hit him, but he was restrained by the handcuffs and held back by the police. Seeing the two of them start quarreling again, the police also had a headache. They had clues about everything else, but the matter of the surveillance cameras in the place where the dogs were placed and the surrounding warehouses still hadn't come to a conclusion. After asking the owner of the manor some questions, the police let him go back first. Although no lives had been lost, quite a number of people had been injured. Whether it was minor or major injuries, external injuries or psychological injuries, the people invited to attend the exhibition had been frightened and blamed the owner of the manor. You're the one who attracted so much hatred. Why did you have to implicate us? You clearly know that you're the target of hatred. Why didn't you do a good job at such an important event like the exhibition? In short, the owner of the manor couldn't shirk his responsibility. He reckoned that no one would be willing to attend his private exhibitions in the next few years. Even if he increased the security measures tenfold in the future, people invited to attend the exhibition would still have to think twice. There were so many exhibitions, and people only had one life. This time, the antique dealer hadn't been ruthless, but what if it was someone even crazier the next time? The owner of the manor had suffered heavy losses this time. Even if he had bought insurance, those painstakingly painted works and treasures would never come back. After returning, the owner of the manor got people to carefully check the items in a few warehouses. Actually, he somewhat believed what the antique dealer had said. He had even admitted to blowing up the exhibition hall and setting fire to it. So there was no need to hide what had happened in the warehouses. There wasn't anything valuable in the warehouses. The most valuable things in this area were the temporarily placed dogs, especially Feng Zhao's curly hair, which was worth 200 million. But not a single dog had been lost. The owner of the manor started to imagine all sorts of scenarios. For example, someone had placed valuable items in his warehouse and then taken advantage of the chaos to move the items out? Wasn't that how it was done in movies? The people in the manor rummaged through a few warehouses but still didn't find anything. Perhaps the person who had taken advantage of the chaos to sneak in had already taken the items away? Since he couldn't find any useful information, the owner of the manor didn't intend to continue dwelling on this matter. He had more important matters to attend to. This time, the people he had invited were all well-known artists or entrepreneurs. He had to apologize to them one by one, especially the unlucky little Will. He was the one who had been injured this time, and it was rumored that he had suffered psychological trauma. Just as the owner of the manor was under pressure, Feng Zhao came looking for him. The owner of the manor only received him for a short while before letting the housekeeper bring Feng Zhao to see the location where the dogs had been placed. The manor housekeeper told Feng Zhao that 2 dogs had escaped from the designated location and had even helped apprehend a suspicious person. Later on, it was confirmed that the person had been involved in the arson. But as for how the 2 dogs had escaped from the cages in the designated location, the reason was still unknown. The tool used to cut open the cages hadn't been found, and no one knew what it was. The fracture of the cages is too difficult to determine. I reckon it was some kind of uncommon pliers, the housekeeper said. Can I take a look at the surveillance footage? Feng Zhao asked. Sure. The housekeeper pulled up the surveillance footage. In the surveillance footage, everything was normal at the beginning. Feng Zhao could even see curly hair demonstrating to other dogs and happily eating dog food. When the incident occurred in the exhibition hall, there was a loud bang, and the dogs in the designated location started barking in fright. Then, the screen flashed, and nothing else. The rest are all the same. There's a problem with the surveillance equipment, the housekeeper said. It's not just here. The other warehouses in the vicinity are the same. Something happened at the same time. Can I take a look at the surveillance footage of the surrounding warehouses? Feng Zhao asked. The housekeeper hesitated for a bit before replying, sure. In any case, the warehouses were filled with junk. It wasn't anything shameful. The surveillance footage at the front of the few warehouses was the same. The same situation occurred at the same time. They all flashed for about a second before completely losing their effectiveness. At the location where the dogs were placed, the surveillance footage flickered the most. During that 1 second, no clear image could be seen, as if the system had malfunctioned. Although the surveillance footage at the warehouse further away also flickered at the same time, a blurry silhouette could still be seen. Feng Zhao didn't show it on his face, but his heart pounded. He had seen a similar situation before. That breakpoint that lasted for about a second. Feng Zhao had returned to the Black Street and pulled up the surveillance footage. At a certain moment during his rebirth, there had been a breakpoint in all the surveillance footage. But at that time, the breakpoint hadn't affected the follow-up work of the surveillance footage. But here, after the breakpoint, all the surveillance footage at the designated location and the nearby warehouses had collapsed. Feng Zhao looked at the area where the dogs were placed. The floor was a mess. He could imagine how chaotic it had been when the dogs had been released. Where's the door? Feng Zhao asked. The door here is controlled by a combination lock and requires identification before it can be opened. But at that time, it also malfunctioned, and then the door opened on its own. The housekeeper also felt that this kind of lock wasn't reliable. If it was malfunctioning, it should have been locked. How could it open on its own? Feng Zhao asked a few more questions before leaving the manor. When he returned to Huang Art's dormitory, Feng Zhao pulled out Curly Hair, who was playing games. Curly Hair whimpered and whined coquettishly when his game was interrupted and rubbed against Feng Zhao's trousers. Seeing Feng Zhao's solemn posture, Curly Hair's wagging tail drooped down and his ears drooped as he squatted obediently. Feng Zhao stared at Curly Hair and asked, "Were you the one who broke the surveillance footage?" Curly Hair tilted his head. His black dog eyes were filled with doubt as his tail moved slowly and cautiously. Feng Zhao paused for a moment before asking, "Were you the one who chewed through the cage?" Woof. Curly Hair raised his head and wagged his tail proudly, looking like he was asking for praise. Feng Zhao pondered as he watched Curly Hair like this. Curly Hair might have had something to do with the surveillance footage at the storage area and the surrounding warehouses. It was just that Curly Hair didn't know, or perhaps he had some awareness but didn't really understand. Of course, this was just Feng Zhao's own guess. After the incident at the exhibition hall, Curly Hair had chewed through the cage and then quickly chewed through the other cages to release all the dogs. Only then could he mislead the public. Curly Hair was very pleased with this, so he asked Feng Zhao for praise. "Look at how smart I am." As for anything else, Feng Zhao couldn't get any answers. Curly Hair was smart, but he couldn't explain things clearly. Feng Zhao also couldn't ask a dog to speak the human language. Fortunately, there wasn't any evidence pointing at Curly Hair. Based on his observations, if the manor owner couldn't find out what had happened at the storage area, there was a high chance that he would pin the blame on that antique dealer. Compared to the matter at the exhibition hall, the area where the dogs were kept and the surrounding warehouses weren't that important. Curly Hair saw that Feng Zhao had become silent again and also quietened down. He only squatted down for a while and looked at Feng Zhao, then at the gaming helmet not far away and whimpered softly. Not waiting for Feng Zhao's reply, Curly Hair whimpered a few more times. Feng Zhao waved his hand. "Go and play." Curly Hair rushed back excitedly, burrowed his head into the gaming helmet, and started playing. Chapter 386. Feng Zhao's time off was limited. By the time the matters in Huangzhou were more or less settled, the manor's owner had also requested for the matter to die down. Without any evidence pointing to Curly Hair, Feng Zhao planned to bring Curly Hair along to Mabersizu. He was worried about leaving the dog here. Before leaving, Feng Zhao went to the hospital to visit Will once again. He happened to bump into Will Sr. and his wife, Will Sr., and some others, who were trying to persuade Will to stay in the hospital for observation. Many people felt that Will's luck was especially bad this time, but Will himself did not think so. He felt that his luck was super good this time. He was not mocking himself, but sincerely believed so. Because of this incident, He finally felt that he had broken through the barrier and was able to start painting. Unfortunately, his family did not allow him to leave the hospital and locked up all his painting tools. Will could only draw pictures in his mind. This way he spoke even less. Anyone would think that this person's psychological trauma must be more serious. Old Will was regretting. I was wrong. I shouldn't have forced him to attend the exhibition. This was the 30th time he had sighed like this. Old Will perked up when he saw Feng Zhao. Feng Zhao asked about Will's condition and learned that the sprain on Will's foot was not serious and that he was recovering well. Other than his foot, Will also had a back injury. He had gotten it when he had been dragged by the dog, but those were all minor injuries. After talking about bringing Curly Hair away, Feng Zhao left under Will's reluctant gaze. Will wanted Curly Hair to stay, but Feng Zhao wouldn't agree this time. After returning to Marasizu, Feng Zhao quickly threw himself back into the team's work. As for Curly Hair, his appetite was still as ferocious in a new place, but he wasn't in good spirits. Nan Feng was still worried that Curly Hair might have been frightened or not acclimatized. He wanted to get a vet to take a look but was stopped by Feng Zhao. This dog was just too free. It wouldn't be happy if it didn't have a game to play. She had to let it move more. Thus, the two salted fish duo once again took on the responsibility of walking the dog. However, the time to walk the dog was at night. There was a rule at the small park not far from the hotel that dogs were not allowed to enter before 10 o'clock at night. After 10 o'clock at night, the small park was basically empty. Pets were only allowed to be taken in for a walk. That day, Zhuoyu saw that it was about time, so he brought Curly Hair to a small park for a stroll. After 10 o'clock at night, there were not many people in the small park. It was deserted. Feng Zhao let them run around with Curly Hair. Zhuoyu had specially changed into a sports attire before coming out. While walking the dog, Zhuoyu noticed a strange kid. The kid was wearing a retro punk-style sweater. He was sitting on a chair by the grass as if he was waiting for someone. When he saw Zhuoyu, the kid's gaze swept over him, but he quickly looked away in disappointment. Zhuoyu didn't care so much and focused on walking the dog. Curly Hair had probably discovered a mouse that had come out at night. He wanted to chase it excitedly, but Zhuoyu pulled him back. You're a dog, not a cat. Why are you catching mice? Be good. We'll go back after running for a while. I'll give you a midnight snack when we get back. Seeing Curly Hair nibbling on a blade of grass, Zhuoyu hurriedly stopped him. Don't eat randomly. This was a 200 million yuan dog. What if it got a stomachache? Do you know how to take care of the flowers and plants in the park? Zhuoyu said. Feng Zhao had instructed him not to let Curly Hair loose too much. Otherwise, it wouldn't be you walking him, but Curly Hair walking you. The person sitting on the chair nearby scoffed when he heard Zhuoyu's words. Talking to a dog about caring for flowers? It was already good enough that they didn't dig a hole. This guy in the sweater was the lost little beast cub that Feng Zhao had dealt a blow to previously. After returning to the club that day, he had started to work hard. However, within 2 days, his lost confidence had soared again. He realized that the other people in the club weren't challenging at all. After understanding the various statistics of the sporting world, the little beast cub started to flaunt his might again and felt that he was still pretty awesome. He even believed that the person he had met in the small park that day who could run the entire night was a robot in human skin. Or perhaps, he had seen a ghost? At this thought, he couldn't help but shiver. However, he was even more curious and wanted to confirm once again. Was he too weak, or was the other party inhuman? Thus, he sneaked out at night to keep watch. He didn't see the target on the first day. 2 days passed in a row, but he still didn't see the target. He figured that if he didn't see the target today, he wouldn't come back for the time being. He would just treat the incident that day as a nightmare. What was done was done. If he could forget it, he would forget it. Looking at the deserted little park, he got up and stretched. Since he was already here, he might as well run to his heart's content. While running, he saw Zhuoyu jogging with the dog, then glanced at the curly-haired dog and sneered. Little short legs. Strictly speaking, Curly Hair wasn't a short-legged breed. However, compared to other medium-sized dogs, he was too small and short, which made his legs seem short. Before Zhuoyu could express his opinion, he felt the leash in his hands tighten. Curly Hair, who had been running leisurely, suddenly charged forward. Zhuoyu was shocked. You can't bite people. Fortunately, Curly Hair only increased his speed and followed behind the other party. He maintained a distance of 2 meters. When the man in the sweater sped up, Curly Hair also sped up. When the other party slowed down, Curly Hair also slowed down. In short, they maintained a fixed distance. That little dog's paws even made a scraping sound as they ran. Zwayu remembered that Curly Hair's paws didn't make that much noise when he ran. Half an hour passed, and the situation was still the same. An hour passed, and it was still the same. Sweat was dripping from the man in the sweater's forehead. That whooshing sound seemed to be urging him from behind, making his heart flutter with panic. However, while the man in the sweater could still run, Zwayu couldn't. He wasn't an athlete and hadn't undergone professional training in this area. He also didn't want to give it his all here. Seeing that Curly Hair still seemed to be full of energy, Zwayu looked around and saw that there was no one else in the park. There were fences along the sides of the park, so he wasn't worried that the dog would get lost or disturb other tourists. Zwayu simply let go of the leash and rested at the side, waiting for Curly Hair to run enough. He could tell that Curly Hair was going to go against him. Another hour passed. The man in the sweater heard not only the scraping sound behind him, but also the panting of a dog. It was as if he was mocking him. He couldn't shake him off no matter how he ran. Zwayu shared the situation with Feng Zhao and the others in the hotel and was delighted to see a joke. This fellow even mocked our Curly Hair's short legs. He's probably about to cry now. Zwayu was rejoicing in Curly Hair's misfortune. However, he hadn't expected Curly Hair to be so good at running. No wonder he was the golden dog that had defeated all the shepherd dogs in Muzhou. Enough. Let him come back, Feng Zhao said. Go back just like that? I think he can still keep running. That's enough, Feng Zhao replied. If he kept running, that fellow would collapse. All right. Even if Zwayu wanted to continue watching that sweater kid make a fool of himself, his boss's orders were more important. Zwayu whistled and shouted, "Let's go back." Boss's orders. Curly Hair puffed out with all his might before changing directions and heading towards Zwayu. Then, he left the small park and returned to the hotel. The next day, the manager of a certain esports club discovered that a new seedling that had started to show off in the past 2 days had left with his head held high last night and returned in tears this morning. Wasn't it a night run? What had happened to him? Mazhou's dogs are too scary. The new seedling looked as though he had suffered a huge blow. Manager. On the other side, Feng Zhao specially rented a treadmill for Curly Hair to run to his heart's content and not agitate others. While Feng Zhao was researching Curly Hair in his spare time, a certain poverty alleviation entertainment program team was gearing up for a big fight. Originally, this was a niche program. In this day and age, real poverty alleviation programs had to go to places that were too bitter. They simply couldn't invite any big-name celebrities with influence. Fortunately, they had the support of the Poverty Alleviation Office and some poverty alleviation funds, so this variety program could continue. This time, the program team actually welcomed Zaro Renault, a celebrity from Liezhou's aristocracy. Zaro had been forcefully thrown into the program team by his father. This time, his father had steeled his heart to let Zaro suffer a little so that he would stop fooling around outside and do more meaningful things to reflect on life. And when Zaro saw that there was no hope for him to be rescued, he had a "if I go to hell, you guys can forget about ascending to heaven" mentality and dragged Wu Tianhao and Barbara down with him. The program team was delighted. This kind of scam came one after another. If not for the number of people, they would have wanted nothing more than to scam all the people in Zaro's contact list. These people had backgrounds and financial resources. They also had the support of Zaro's father, General Renault. With such a strong backing, their program team was going to make a comeback. The program team contacted the commanding officer of a certain planet near the bottom of the development sequence to discuss cooperation. The commanding officer of the base was excited. He had expended a lot of effort this year to obtain military funds and resources. He was thinking of upgrading the base's equipment when he received the program team's message. A poverty alleviation program? Great, great. It would be even better if they could pull in some development funds. However, when he saw the guest list and a portion of the program team's proposal, the commanding officer's face turned green. Are you fucking kidding me? Look at who these people are. Are they here to help the poor or to flaunt their wealth? What poverty alleviation team? Idiot team. The program team negotiated for a bit more and painted a beautiful picture of the future. The commanding officer sneered. Fuck you. Do you think I will lose when it comes to painting a picture? You want to confuse me with such insignificant tricks? They didn't want to wait on a bunch of pampered young masters and mistresses. Troublesome. If they weren't careful, they would get into trouble. The gains didn't make up for the losses. The program team didn't give up. The Poverty Alleviation Office also came forward to persuade them. The higher-ups of the base held a small meeting and finally came to a decision. We can cooperate, but we have a request. If you can bring him over, we will agree to the cooperation. Who? The program team was curious. Feng Zhao. Professor Carter's eyelids were twitching violently today. He kept feeling uneasy, but after going through all the important matters one by one, he didn't find anything that was out of his control. He had just reported to Mo Lang about his work. Mo Lang had told him to guard against infiltration by the entertainment industry, and he had agreed. Carter really didn't care much about being infiltrated by the entertainment industry. This was Mazhou after all. Every day, there were all sorts of competitions and gossip about famous athletes. Who would notice Feng Zhao, who spent most of his time in the hotel composing? Chapter 387. Feng Zhao didn't know that someone was plotting against him. During his time in Mazhou, besides working on team projects, he had also been preparing for his advanced studies graduation concert. The graduation concert was similar to a graduation thesis. If the quality wasn't up to standard, if the overall score wasn't enough, then he would have to continue studying. Thus, some people could graduate early, while others had to stay and study. Feng Zhao's little notebook had already recorded a portion of his work, but it wasn't enough. After submitting the portion of the team project's results, Feng Zhao planned to go out for a walk when he heard Yan Biao mocking Zui Yu. Look at how useless you are. You can't even compare to curly hair. Yan Biao mocked the half-dead Zui Yu on the treadmill. One of my legs can last longer than you. Will you die if you don't brag? That leg of yours is powered by M. Zui Yu jumped off the treadmill and wiped his sweat with a towel. He glanced at Curly Hair, who was running along to a game song and jumping to the beat. He swallowed back the words he wanted to say to Yan Biao. Humans are really inferior to dogs. Feng Zhao rented 2 treadmills. One of them was specially for Curly Hair. This dog wasn't ordinary. Feng Zhao didn't intend to let him run for long periods of time outside, but he couldn't slack off either. When he was alone, he made Curly Hair persist in running every day and stop thinking about games. However, Curly Hair had learned to slack off. When Feng Zhao wasn't around, Zui Yu and Yan Biao couldn't control this little thing. Because Curly Hair's net worth wasn't low, Yan Biao and Zui Yu had to be careful even when playing with the dog, afraid of pulling out a strand of fur. They didn't have the guts to do such things. When Feng Zhao found out about this, he downloaded many game songs from games Curly Hair played on the treadmill. They were all from games Curly Hair played on a loop and automatically ended after 3 hours. Thus, Curly Hair ran for 3 hours every day. Today, Zui Yu tried running at the same time and jumped off the treadmill after 2 hours. Yan Biao mocked him for not being able to run as well as Curly Hair. Zui Yu tossed the towel aside and raised his head 45 degrees. Back then, before I retired, don't think about the past. When I didn't retire, it was just as easy. Yan Biao interrupted. For this short distance, we still had to take care of strength training. Both of them despised each other for bragging and reminisced about their past selves. After retiring, although he still insisted on working out, fitness was self-training. To put it bluntly, it was more like a kind of entertainment. Before he retired, it was passive training. He had to train for a long time. He couldn't just rest when he was tired. It was more like a job. Zui Yu sighed. Sure enough, a comfortable life can corrupt a person. I am much more useless than before. I can't even outrun an unknown athlete from Mazhou. He gave up on competing with Curly Hair, this special dog that was worth 200 million. Based on what you said, maybe he is a hidden top athlete? Don't look down on Mazhou's top-notch professional athletes. Those long-distance runners can run at least 40 kilometers and do all sorts of tricks. Before your muscles have even rested, they can run again. They are all talented people. We can't compare ourselves to them in this aspect. Yan Biao analyzed rationally. Right. Back then, besides physical training, we also had to train our skills and techniques. It wasn't just running. Zhua Yu was a little consoled. Our garrison is much tougher than yours. The training intensity is much higher, Yan Biao said. Keep bragging. I have never seen it. Although Zhua Yu said this, he mostly agreed. Garrison troops on planet Y might be slightly better, but he knew what kind of place Baiji had been. Even if he had never been there, he knew what kind of place Baiji had been. The planet's native species were too powerful. However, after new mineral deposits had been discovered on planet Baiji, it had been the domain of humans. Now that the competition for mineral deposits was intense, it wouldn't be a place they could go easily in the short term. You will know when you go to the Y garrison. It doesn't need to be as difficult as planet Baiji. Those planetary bases at the end of the development sequence are similar. You will have to shed a layer of skin first. Aren't you looking down on me? As if I have never shed a layer of skin before. After saying this, the two of them felt gloomy. They couldn't go on like this. If they degenerated, they would only be abused when they met comrades in the future. They had agreed to start a new life after retiring, but their experiences in the military still had a deep impact. They didn't want to admit that they had become weaker. Just as they were thinking this, they saw Feng Zhao come out and hurriedly set aside their distracting thoughts. Setting aside how to strengthen themselves first, this job couldn't be thrown away. It definitely couldn't be thrown away. Zhua Yu and Yan Biao were worried that Feng Zhao had overheard what they had just said. They knew that Feng Zhao's ears were very sharp. However, Feng Zhao didn't say anything. He walked over to check on Curly Hair's running time and condition. This little thing treated it like a game. He would perk up the moment he heard the game song and was having a great time jogging. Where's Nan Feng? Feng Zhao asked. He just took a call and went out. It seemed like someone was looking for him. I saw his surprised expression when he picked up. Zhua Yu replied. As they were talking, Nan Feng rushed in from outside with a conflicted expression. He was delighted to see Feng Zhao. Boss, the director of Up Close Contact, was looking for you. He wants to invite you to be a guest for the next episode. What the heck is Up Close Contact? Yan Biao and Zhua Yu had blank looks on their faces. Although they had already looked up a lot of information on the entertainment industry, they had no recollection of this program. It's a slightly official variety show. Nan Feng had a deeper understanding of variety shows than Zhua Yu and Yan Biao. To put it simply, it's an entertainment variety show with the goal of poverty alleviation. Poverty alleviation? Poverty alleviation where? Is there a need for that now? The various foundations aren't just for show. Zhua Yu was curious. Nan Feng pointed to the sky. Extraterrestrial. Zhua Yu and Yan Biao's eyebrows twitched, but they didn't say anything else. Regardless of what they thought, they still had to follow their boss's footsteps. Whatever their boss decided, they would follow. Feng Zhao took the information Nan Feng handed over and quickly flipped through it. Tell me briefly. It's like this. Nan Feng told Feng Zhao everything he knew. Feng Zhao had participated in variety shows before. Back then, he had joined Project Starlight during his military service. Unlike Project Starlight, which was jointly promoted by the Ministry of Education and various military leaders, Project Starlight was mainly targeted at young people evading military service. This program was promoted by the Poverty Alleviation Office and supported by many official media outlets. However, it was indeed a variety entertainment program. It was just that it hadn't been able to invite popular celebrities or big-name artists. Most of the celebrities it had managed to invite were not popular enough or had already retired from the industry. Some online video platforms weren't willing to buy the rights, so most people didn't know about it. The program had a niche audience. It was precisely because it was public welfare and poverty alleviation, as well as the support of several influential official media outlets, that it had managed to survive until now. In Nanfeng's opinion, the production aspect was rather average. The places that the program's guests had to go to were truly arduous. No wonder celebrities didn't want to go. If they were accidentally injured, it would be a huge loss. Let me take a look at past episodes. Nanfeng, did they say where they would be going for the next episode? Feng Zhao asked. Nanfeng shook his head. They didn't reveal which planet. In any case, it will definitely be one of the lower end of the development sequence. That won't change. To put it bluntly, it meant poverty, hardship, and places where daily life was inconvenient. Also, because this program is public welfare, so Nan Feng glanced at Feng Zhao's expression. The director might ask for a friendship discount. When Nan Feng found out about this from the program team, he secretly curled his lips. How could there be a friendship discount if there was no friendship? Did they really think they were going there to suffer? Boss, because you were behind closed doors composing, they went to chat with Professor Carter first. They will look for you in a bit. While Nan Feng was explaining the situation to Feng Zhao, the program team had already spoken to Carter. The program team was feeling bitter. It was fine dealing with people from the entertainment industry, but they really couldn't be tough with this bunch of academic professors. They could only soften their tone and show weakness, but their ultimate goal wouldn't change. They had even invited a few big shots from the Poverty Alleviation Office. Actually, it wasn't that they had to find Feng Zhao. It had been requested by the people at the military base. Feng Zhao was their only designated guest. It didn't matter how many other guests were added or removed, as long as Feng Zhao was brought along. The people at the military base were also very shrewd. Being stationed on an alien planet without much development value was already tough enough. Who would be willing to be a babysitter? It wasn't that they looked down on the descendants of great generals. Some of the descendants of great generals were rather impressive, but Lai Zhou's Zhao, La Zhou's Barbara, and Tongzhou's Wu Tianhao? What kind of people were they? Even if one didn't follow the entertainment industry or watch other programs, one just had to search online to get a general idea. Due to communication conditions and internal regulations, the number of entertainment programs available to the military base on many alien planets was limited. Therefore, the people in charge of culture and arts would select a few suitable entertainment programs and transmit them to the various bases and military districts. These included music and songs, television dramas, sports events, variety shows, and news highlights from various continents. Some time ago, the entire season of Founding Era had been packaged and sent to the various bases and military districts. The compressed package also contained the original soundtracks of all the chapters of Founding Era. Having a series to watch, and a top-notch production at that, delighted the garrison troops at the various alien bases. But amidst their happiness, they were also thoroughly abused by the plot. Many people had become Feng Zhao's fans. A few of Feng Zhao's compositions were also loved by everyone. Feng Zhao also had the status of a reserve duty major. Many unlucky people who had been assigned there viewed Feng Zhao as an idol. Of course, the leaders of the bases did not just look at Feng Zhao's popularity and his status as a reserve duty major. They also looked at the rise of Planet Baiji and Planet Y. It just so happened that a program team had approached them and wanted them to cooperate with the production of an episode, so they had raised this request. The effects of the program Up Close Contact were not that great. Otherwise, the garrisoned bases at the back of the development sequence would have become awe-inspiring long ago. Reality TV. Reality TV. That was a show. It was an entertainment program produced for people to watch. Even though it was meant to help the poor, many military officers at the garrison bases rejected it. It was not that they looked down on these people. They were grateful for their help, but at the same time, it also brought trouble to the special guests. There had been a celebrity who had fallen seriously ill at a certain garrisoned base because his immune system was too weak. Luckily, he had been treated in time. Otherwise, there would have been a lot of trouble. Therefore, sometimes the military officers at the garrison bases hoped that the big-shot celebrity would come, but they were worried that something would happen on their own turf and cause even more pressure from public opinion. However, if it was Feng Zhao, they would feel much more at ease. Feng Zhao had served in the military on Planet Baiji and had fought terrorists. His qualities were tough enough, able to withstand torment. And he even had the title of a mythical beast. Mythical beasts. Weren't they supposed to ward off evil in the legends of the old era? The three special guests that the program team had chosen were too evil. They needed one more to balance things out. Due to the demands of the garrison bases, the program team tried their best to persuade Carter. They spoke with Carter for close to an hour before leaving to look for Feng Zhao. While the other party was looking for Feng Zhao, Carter hurriedly sent a message to Mo Lang. When Mo Lang found out about the situation, Carter lowered his head, not daring to look. A silence that made one tremble. Facing Mo Lang's eyes that were like death rays, Carter braced himself and said, "Teacher, regarding this matter, I can explain." Mo Lang took a deep breath. How infuriating. He had just told Carter to isolate Feng Zhao from the entertainment circle during his advanced studies, and in the blink of an eye, he heard that a certain variety program had come to poach him. Carter was indeed unreliable. He couldn't even keep an eye on a single person. Chapter 388. The schedule of the program team was rather tight. There were 5 special guests for this episode. Besides Feng Zhao, Zero, Barbara, and Wu Tianhao, there was also Midasi. That's right, Ma Erzhou's retired former professional tennis player Midasi was also a special guest for this episode. What was surprising was that the program team had not expected to invite him, and he had even taken the initiative to contact them. In the past, the program had not been able to invite 2 satisfactory special guests even if they broke their legs. This time, so many heavyweights had come. Because of the powerful lineup for this episode, the program team had a rare confidence. Their backs were stiff, and they wished they could hold their heads up high. However, due to the confidentiality agreement, they could not divulge it privately. After all 5 special guests had signed the contract, the program team immediately started the preliminary publicity. First, they would attract more attention. From the preliminary preparations to the end of filming, the topics would be kept lively. Just as the program team had expected, once the 5 special guests were released, everyone's attention was focused on them. When most people saw this news, their first reaction was, "What the heck is this? Up-close contact? What kind of program is this? I've never heard of it before." Another search. A poverty alleviation variety program? 4 of the 5 special guests were from top aristocratic families. All from the families of great generals. Such a powerful lineup of extravagant special guests going to poverty alleviation? Logically speaking, if 4 young masters and mistresses from top aristocratic families went to poverty alleviation, even if it was a withered blade of grass, it would still grow into a towering tree. However, this lineup gave people an extremely unreliable feeling. Poverty alleviation is not as simple as a donation. Surely Zero won't just throw money in, right? Barbara is covered in luxury goods. How does it look like she is going to poverty alleviation? Is she on vacation? A while ago, Wu Tianhao was promoting his new film and even said that a sequel was in preparation. Is she hitching a ride to film a sequel? Ma Zhou's little tennis prince Midasi's first stop after retiring is poverty alleviation? Is she carrying out a family mission? It feels like she is playing a big game of chess. Is there something important that I've overlooked recently? There is still Feng Zhao. Don't overlook Feng Zhao. 4 of the 5 special guests are from wealthy families. I don't believe this last one's background can be that low. That's right. Zaro of the Renault family, Barbara of the Lacalina family, Wu Tianhao of the Wu family of Tongzhou, and Midasi Mars, who had just stirred up a storm on Mersizhao. All 4 of them came from families of great generals. From the looks of it, Feng Zhao definitely had an extraordinary background. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been dragged along with this group of people. Didn't we clarify it before? Feng Zhao isn't from a wealthy family. Just because it wasn't in the past doesn't mean it won't be in the future. Look at Ma Zhou's Midasi. He just added his surname. Who could have predicted this before the press conference? Makes sense. If that's the case, Feng Zhao might also be hiding his aristocratic status. Agreed. Even if he isn't a descendant of a great general, his status wouldn't be that low. More and more people online started to believe that Feng Zhao had a hidden aristocratic background. As for Feng Zhao's explanation? Not listening, not listening. They must be fooling people. Don't try to fool me. Because of the incident with Midasi, we've already seen through your background. Even the HR manager of Yenzhou's Silver Wing Media hurriedly flipped through Feng Zhao's information a few more times after seeing all this, but he still couldn't find any evidence. Either Feng Zhao was hiding the most important information, or the netizens were overthinking things. Inside a certain hotel in Huangzhou, great-grandfather Feng was so angry when he saw the discussions online that he nearly dropped the walnut in his hand. Great-grandmother Feng hurriedly snatched the walnut and stuffed a slipper into great-grandfather Feng's hand.
Great-grandfather Fong quietly looked at the slipper in his hand for 2 seconds before forcefully throwing it on the floor with a loud thud.
Nonsense! What does my family's little Zhao have to do with a great general's family? Great-grandfather Fong was very vexed. Why was it that no matter how he explained, this bunch of people just wouldn't believe him? Aristocratic family? In another 50 years, no, in another 20 years, my family's little Zhao will be an aristocratic family himself. And a great aristocratic family at that. Great-grandfather Fong had this bit of confidence. In great-grandfather Fong's heart, Fong Zhao was all round in all aspects, a genius among geniuses. He couldn't be compared to anyone else. The moment the up-close contact program team released the news, it triggered a heated discussion online. Some people were discussing whether the aristocratic families were plotting something, others were guessing Fong Zhao's aristocratic family background, and the rest were happily watching the commotion. Of course, there were also celebrities who started having ideas after seeing the news. Before General Renault had thrown Zaro into the program team, the up-close contact program team had sought out a few celebrities with some reputation for this episode, but they had all been rejected. Now, it wasn't just the few celebrities they had sought out before, but there were also people they had sought out for previous episodes. One by one, they took the initiative to contact the program team, wanting to join. The number of people on each episode was around 5, but it wasn't fixed. Sometimes it was 2 or 3, sometimes it was 6 or 7. Now that 5 people had already been announced, 2 more would be fine. Many people had the same thought, but this time, the program team only intended to find 5 special guests. The entire program team attached great importance to this episode and didn't intend to let any other celebrities get involved. These few people were enough to keep them busy. Faced with those celebrities who had taken the initiative to approach, the program team tactfully rejected them and said that they were also stuck between a rock and a hard place. First, they didn't dare offend the special guests, and second, they didn't dare fall out with the military base, so this was all they could do. Their tone was very polite. There was no helping it. They were used to acting like grandsons in front of those big names, and it was hard for them to put on airs. When slightly more famous celebrities called, they still habitually smiled along. This was the first time they had received such treatment, and it made them feel refreshed. Their desire to use this episode to make a comeback was even stronger. As the discussions online were getting heated, people from the Poverty Alleviation Office were on the phone with Zaro's father, General Renault. Have you really decided? The commotion this time is a little big. The filming process will be more serious and more arduous, a certain Poverty Alleviation Office leader said. General Renault didn't really mind. It's fine. I just want him to suffer a little.
He likes the entertainment industry, and it just so happens that you have a show that has something to do with the entertainment industry, so I'll throw him over.
I don't dare let him touch other projects. In his opinion, this sort of entertainment variety show that could achieve its goal by selling stupidity was the most suitable for his son. This person wasn't soft-hearted when it came to screwing over his son. The Poverty Alleviation Office leader chuckled. Then, he retracted his smile and said in a low voice, "Let me emphasize once again that helping the poor is a very serious matter. Even if it is an entertainment variety show, it is not a place for them to fool around." General Renault assured, "You don't have to worry. I have already told Zaro that if he makes a fuss, I will skin him alive." Zaro, who had been made a fool of by his own father, felt very aggrieved. Do you know how difficult it is to film this kind of variety show? Don't you need acting skills to be on a variety show? The next day was also the set departure time by the program team. This time, Feng Zhao brought along Nanfeng, Zui Yu, and Yen Biao, as well as curly hair. Great-grandfather Feng and great-grandmother Feng insisted on sending him to the spaceport before leaving. Great-grandfather Feng had his own plans. He wanted to see what the program team was like and what the other special guests were like. Feng Zhao felt that he had brought enough people this time, but great-grandfather Feng didn't think so. Given Feng Zhao's current reputation, an assistant and 2 bodyguards were too few. However, the program team was going to a military base on a foreign planet, so they couldn't be too casual. They had to observe the situation first. The program team had an assembly point near Huangzhou's spaceport. When Feng Zhao arrived, only a portion of the program team was there. The other special guests were nowhere to be seen. A staff member explained to Feng Zhao, "The other 4 will be here shortly." Not long after, Midacy arrived in a casual outfit, carrying a bag, and wearing sunglasses. After entering the lounge, he took off his sunglasses, revealing dark circles under his eyes. He sat down and yawned. Even though Midacy had said it in a carefree manner during his retirement press conference, when he had really retired, he hadn't been able to sleep well for a single day. This time, his family elders had heard that Lai Zhou, La Zhou, and Tong Zhou were sending people to participate in certain poverty alleviation entertainment variety shows, so they had kicked him over. They had said that it would definitely improve his sleep and would also be a post-retirement adaptation period. After Midacy arrived, Wu Tianhao, Zhao, and Barbara arrived in succession. Each one was more ostentatious than the last. When great-grandfather Feng saw that everyone else had brought along a bunch of bodyguards and assistants, he held his breath. To prevent anyone from being wrongly accused, he even went to check with the program team staff to see how many people the other 4 special guests were bringing. With one look, great-grandfather Feng realized that all 4 special guests had brought along more people than Feng Zhao. Midacy had 2 assistants and 4 bodyguards. Wu Tianhao had also brought along a 7-person team. As for Zhao and Barbara, they had brought along 10-person teams. If not for the program team limiting the number of people they could bring along at most 10 people, they would have brought 10 cars full of people. Great-grandfather Feng was so angry that his face turned red. Were they going to poverty alleviation, or were they going on vacation? Outrageous! Especially that Zhao. However, after listening to Zhao and the others' off-key conversation, great-grandfather Feng suddenly felt his anger dissipate quite a bit. He had been comforted. If someone like Zhao wanted to make others feel at ease, even bringing along a reinforced platoon wouldn't be enough. Great-grandfather Feng felt some sympathy for their parents. Sigh, forget it. Not everyone's child is as smart and obedient as our family's little Zhao. Great-grandfather Feng thought to himself. Before Feng Zhao set off, great-grandfather Feng pulled Feng Zhao aside and exhorted, "Pay more attention when you go to a foreign planet's military base. Although it hasn't been revealed which planet it is, it will surely be a poor place. Little Zhao, your own safety is number 1. Great-grandfather Feng had specially emphasized your own safety, so that Feng Zhao could take care of himself first. As for the others, they could wait. As he spoke, he raised his voice to let more people hear him. Properly record the program and take care of the younger children in the team. Loving the young is a traditional virtue." The reason he had said this was because this old man had checked. Among the 5 special guests in the team, Feng Zhao was the youngest. Taking care of the younger in the team wasn't wrong, but the others should take care of Feng Zhao. Feng Zhao was silent for a few seconds before nodding. "I understand." Chapter 389. Feng Zhao didn't request absolute secrecy for bringing curly hair along this time. There were so many people in the program team, so it was impossible to completely keep it a secret. Hiding it would instead make people more suspicious. However, Feng Zhao requested the program team to reduce curly hair's presence during the recording process. Feng Zhao's request was added to the agreement, and the program team readily agreed. In any case, from their point of view, it was just a dog and wasn't the main point. The main point was that the 5 special guests were about to experience the arduous process of living on an impoverished planet. Great-grandfather Feng and great-grandmother Feng watched as the flying transport carrying Feng Zhao and the others left the spaceport with the others who were sending them off. Feng Zhao arranged for people to take care of them and send the 2 elders back to Yenzhou. Great-grandfather Feng started recommending this program to others upon returning to Yenzhou. Although there was still some time before production and broadcast, hadn't the officials already started promoting it? Great-grandfather Feng couldn't fall behind. Elsewhere, after the flying transport left Earth, they switched to another flying transport at the spaceport and headed for their destination. This wasn't Feng Zhao's first time leaving Earth, but every time he did so, it felt wonderful. Humanity's footsteps were still unceasingly moving forward. After the 100 years of calamity, humans knew how to prepare for a rainy day. Once they stepped out, they could set their sights even further. Feng Zhao didn't have high hopes that this sort of poverty alleviation program would be able to bring about any major changes to those impoverished planets, but it was better than nothing. He would first take a look at the situation and help out as much as he could. It has already come to this point. Can you at least tell us where we are going this time? Wu Tianhao said in a huff. The program team members didn't mind Wu Tianhao's tone. If they were in his shoes, they wouldn't feel good either. Director. A staff member looked at the program team's director. The director coughed lightly and nodded. Planet Boo, as he spoke, he got someone to turn on the projector and introduce Planet Boo's situation. What kind of place was Planet Boo? Barren, desolate, and mediocre among the planets waiting to be developed. Although it wasn't at the bottom of the development sequence, it was still quite far behind. Earlier on, it had actually been ranked ahead of Planet Baiji. It was only when Planet Baiji had taken off due to its energy or deposits that it had been pushed to the back. Looking at the map, 70 to 80% of the planet's surface was covered by oceans and deserts. In terms of resources and scenery, it was far inferior to Planet Baiji and Planet Y. Furthermore, compared to other planets that were more suitable for habitation, Planet Boo had many areas with low pressure and low oxygen levels. Many newcomers would develop discomfort similar to altitude sickness. This was also the reason why the production team valued the guests' physique. The contracted guests had all been arranged to go through a physical examination, and only those who met the requirements could come over. Planet Boo wasn't treated as a planet for immigration. Although its living conditions were a notch worse than Planet Baiji and Planet Y, it was safe and simple. Places with vile climates were avoided, and there was sufficient free space within the safety zone where the base was located. But at the same time, because Baiji was ranked at the back, it had not had its turn to develop, and its current conditions were still very tough. It was impossible to go online as one pleased, and the cost of setting up a communications framework was even higher than on Planet Baiji. Thus, the program team had said from the start that this would be a recorded broadcast and there would be no live broadcasts. The 5 honored guests who watched Planet Boo's introduction and video, Wu Tianhao, who was ready to show off his skills in a live broadcast of beating monsters and pretending to be a hero. The production team tricked me. Barbara, who envisioned taking beautiful photos and videos. The production team tricked me. Midasi, who had listened to his elder's suggestion to come here for a vacation to improve his sleep, stared blankly. My family is screwing me over. Mentally prepared, Zaro wrote an email to the Liezhou governor. My dad is screwing me over again. Your adorable, smiling, angelic grandson is about to suffer a hellish torture. Feng Zhao, who didn't have high expectations for the location. The introduction said that the base had a lot of freedom. It should be a good place to walk the dog. When they finally saw the full picture of Planet Boo, 4 of the 5 honored guests were listless. Only Feng Zhao was carefully flipping through the information on Planet Boo. Every honored guest had brought some supplies to be delivered to Boo Base's garrison. However, they didn't need to personally deliver the supplies as there were professionals in charge of receiving them at the spaceport. This spaceport is too small. Zaro gestured with his hand. It's so small. It's really poor. The total number of people isn't even half of what Planet Baiji had in the early days. Midasi was disappointed but also curious. This was the first time he was truly going on a long journey. Are there really no hunting conditions? Wu Tianhao was still unresigned. The program team replied with a smile. First-timers will roughly need 3 to 7 days to adapt. We have set aside 7 days of preparation time for everyone, someone from the program team said. The person who received them was the base's military officer, Colonel Song Ping. He looked rather young and was a little tanned. His attitude was modest yet somewhat unyielding. Zaro's nose twitched as he took a sniff when they arrived at the base's airport. Barbara was absent-mindedly painting her nails. What did that dog nose of yours smell again? Strange smell. Zaro reacted. Who are you scolding? Seeing that a quarrel was about to break out, the program team hurriedly diverted their attention. The base has already prepared rooms for everyone. Everyone, bring your belongings. Don't forget your valuables. Nanfeng hurriedly carried Curly Hair and followed beside Feng Zhao. From his point of view, besides boss, the most valuable thing was Curly Hair. He had to look after Curly Hair well. If Curly Hair got lost, who knew if someone would secretly catch him and eat him up? After entering the base, Colonel Song Ping gave them an electronic map that marked out the areas where they could move around. Generally speaking, as long as they followed the base's regulations, there wouldn't be much danger and there would be a lot of freedom. This was also the reason why the program team had chosen Boo Base. If it were any other place, even though the conditions would be better, there would be too many restrictions on their activities and filming wouldn't be as carefree. Feng Zhao stayed in the rooms that the base had arranged for them. Every special guest had a suite, and their assistants and bodyguards lived close by. This had been discussed between the program team and the base to prevent any mishaps from happening. Nothing could happen to these special guests. Feng Zhao's side had the fewest people. Nanfeng instructed Zui Yu and Yan Biao to tidy up the room and install all sorts of facilities that could improve the living conditions. He had heard that the temperature difference between day and night was huge. The base's conditions were limited and might not be able to take care of everything. As someone who had served on planet Baiji before, Nanfeng originally didn't fuss over such things. Feng Zhao himself had said that he didn't have high requirements for his living quarters. However, Nanfeng couldn't stand watching the other 4 special guests busying themselves. Their side can't be lacking either. After all, the base didn't say that they weren't allowed to install these themselves. On the first day of arriving at Bu Base, many people in the program team weren't used to it. They only felt better after the base sent over breathing masks. There were also some who had strong reactions and were sent for medical treatment. There weren't any major problems, but it would take longer for them to adapt than others. The base's breathing masks were manufactured according to the local environment and were meant to help first-timers get through the adaptation period. As for the 5 special guests, breathing masks were also sent over. Somewhere on the base, Colonel Song Ping, who was in charge of receiving the program team, was called over to report on the situation. Base Commanding Officer Flemington, who had just returned from outside, loosened his shoulders, sat on a chair, and stretched. He closed his eyes to hide his sleepiness and asked somewhat helplessly, "How are things over there? Have the breathing masks been sent over?" "They have been sent over. The others are fine, but the 5 special guests aren't wearing them," Song Ping reported truthfully. "Oh." Flemington opened his eyes and looked over with interest. "Tell me about it." Former professional athlete Midasi is still adapting well and didn't have much of a reaction after arriving at the base. However, he went to the sports stadium to play basketball for 10 minutes before going back to lie down. Flemington's lips curled into a smile. The Mars family's youngster is rather impressive. He has just arrived and hasn't gone through the adaptation period, yet he still dares to exercise vigorously. Continue. Wu Tianhao's degree of adaptation is about the same as Midasi's, but he said that he wants to challenge his body's limits. He didn't wear a breathing mask and went outside to practice boxing. He is now meditating. Flemington's smile deepened. He has some characteristics of Tongzhou's Wu family. What about the others? Zaro's adaptability isn't as good as the first 2. He received treatment the moment he entered the base. Song Ping paused slightly and said with a complicated tone, "His emotions are rather intense. His breathing mask fell to the side and he is cursing his father now." "Oh my." Flemington was delighted. He's in good spirits. Hasn't this fellow's rebellious phase passed yet? Continue. Barbara. Although she isn't used to it either, when we sent over a breathing mask, she rejected it very bluntly. Reason? Flemington asked. Song Ping opened his mouth and said awkwardly, "Ugly rejection." Flemington. Such a pretentious attitude. You still think the mask doesn't look good? If you don't like it, then forget it. Take back the mask. Oh right, where's Feng Zhao? The main point is him. How is his degree of adaptation? Song Ping had a strange expression. Feng Zhao went out to walk the dog. Flemington. This was the first time he had heard of such a situation. He was actually in the mood to walk the dog here? No, the main point was that Feng Zhao even brought the dog along? That dog didn't show any signs of discomfort? And then? Flemington asked. I heard from the patrolling soldiers that he was rather happy walking the dog, and has no intention of returning for the time being. Chapter 390. Feng Zhao didn't bring curly hair too far. He followed the map provided by the base and walked around the areas where they could freely move around. He wanted to understand the terrain and lifestyle here. Bu Base had a large area, and they had a wide range of activities. Occasionally, they would run into patrolling soldiers, but they seemed more relaxed and didn't seem as tense as the soldiers at Baiji's outpost. This place was very dull, but it was also peaceful. Curly Hair's adaptability was very strong. The low-pressure and low-oxygen environment didn't cause him any inconvenience. The barren sand didn't make him lose interest either. He seemed to like this place very much. There was no one else around, and Feng Zhao didn't leash Curly Hair. At this moment, Curly Hair was running around happily on the sand. He was also very interested in the various insects and animals under the sand. Feng Zhao observed for a while and didn't see Curly Hair show any signs of discomfort, so he let it be. After strolling one round outside, Feng Zhao brought Curly Hair back to the base. The next day, Feng Zhao met Wu Tianhao and Maitasi at the base's cafeteria. After the previous day, the two of them seemed to have adapted even better. However, Maitasi still looked as though he hadn't had enough sleep. It wasn't just Wu Tianhao and Maitasi. Zaro and Barbara also went out for a walk today. However, the two of them didn't eat at the cafeteria and ate their own food. The program team sighed when they saw the 5 people going out for a walk. Genes are really a very powerful thing. No wonder they are descendants of great generals. Their adaptability is really strong. Genes meant potential. As long as they didn't waste this potential, they had an advantage over others. Wasting was another matter. We can't compare the other 4. After all, they are descendants of great generals. Their genes are awesome, but what about Feng Zhao? He even has a background in art. We can't compare to the other 4. We have to learn from him. The director started feeding chicken soup for the soul to the other staff members of the program team. Actually, the director felt helpless. This was the first time that all the invited guests were more adaptable than the staff members. He reckoned that by the time the guests could start filming, they wouldn't be able to keep up. With this problem in mind, the director adjusted the arrangements. They couldn't officially start filming, but the guests could be mobilized first. The director gathered the 5 guests together and started mobilizing them. The instruction manual that was sent to you has recorded a lot of important information. Edible and poisonous things are all in there. It's best not to touch anything that isn't recorded. Thus, non-professionals shouldn't touch things that weren't recorded. At first, Zaro listened attentively, but as he listened, he began to slack off. It was hard to tell from his face, but in fact, this was what he was thinking. Previously, he made more money by frying wild ginger, but it was not sustainable. Ginger was fine, but it was better to fry garlic. Since Feng Zhao had brought a dog over, I can also bring one next time. I don't like small dogs. Big dogs are more impressive. When can I get through to you? I'm going to complain. Zaro's brain jumped from ginger to dog in 2 minutes, and then quickly jumped to other places. After emphasizing the points that needed attention, the director talked about the key points of poverty alleviation. There was a saying in the old era, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. The current poverty alleviation was generally based on discovering the shining points of impoverished areas and magnifying them to further improve the quality of life in impoverished areas. However, it sounded simple, but how many people could actually do it? What's more, this was originally an entertainment program. They didn't really expect to find any highlights. They just wanted to use the program to let everyone know about the hardships here so that they would consider this place more when they donate. Of course, regardless of what they thought in their hearts or how cruel the reality was, the director wouldn't be so realistic when mobilizing people. Watch more, listen more, move around more, and understand more. Given everyone's experience and intelligence, you should be able to discover the shining points here, the director concluded. Wu Tianhao. Watch more, listen more? Definitely. With my eyes and ears, I can see 6 roads and hear 8 directions. Maitasi. Move around more, understand more? Seems like the amount of exercise is quite high. Zaro. My intelligence? Barbara. Shining point? Feng Zhao. A little difficult. The director was satisfied when he saw the 5 special guests looking pensive. It seemed like the 5 special guests had already understood what he was saying. After clapping his hands to get everyone to come back to their senses, the director said, as some of our program team staff have not adapted yet, we can't officially start work. Therefore today, Colonel Song Ping will be bringing everyone around to have a look. Planet Boo's personnel turnover rate was higher than that of Planet Baiji and Planet Y. After all, the environment here wasn't suitable for ordinary people to live in. It was fine for a few years, but some people wouldn't be able to take it if it was too long. Therefore, soldiers stationed on a base wouldn't be stationed for more than 10 years before being transferred elsewhere. Colonel Song Ping had previously served on the exploration ship Fomalhaut before being transferred here for a period of time. His military merits were already sufficient, and he would be able to rise up after a little more experience. This was his second year on planet Boo. After 3 years at most, he would be transferred to other places. Basically, it would be those planets at the top of the development sequence. Although he didn't plan on staying on planet Boo for long, Song Ping was still rather cordial to the special guests. Even though he couldn't change planet Boo's current development situation, the special guests could at least bring some financial support. As this was the program team's second day on planet Boo, Midas took into consideration that the few of them were just getting used to the environment and couldn't overexert themselves. Therefore, he specially arranged for a vehicle from the base to drive the few of them out. Along the way, he introduced the uses of the various regions. As he gazed at the desert in the distance, Midas pointed at his feet and asked, "Is there oil beneath the desert? I have seen some records of the old era that mention this. In the old era, oil was a very important source of energy." Song Ping nodded his head. Many places on planet Boo have detected it, but it isn't necessary. For daily use, the heat radiation provided by the stars is sufficient. It is more convenient, and the cost is low. Our base mostly uses photovoltaic power generation. As for higher-grade energy requirements, we can directly use the energy ores that are transported over. Later on, Song Ping brought them to look at the farmland. Every year, the conscripts that are sent over will be assigned to work on the various farmland, grow crops, or improve the soil. "You can grow things here?" Zaro pointed at the monotonous and desolate desert and didn't dare to believe it. "Yes, as long as there is water, it can be grown. The pipelines have already been laid long ago. Within the plan's scope, the water can still keep up with the demand," Song Ping replied. Very quickly, they arrived at the farmland region. Crops of different heights grew sparsely in the improved soil. It doesn't look like they are growing very well. Midas didn't know much about farming, but he could at least tell if the crops were growing well. Song Ping chuckled. "The output isn't high, but at least we won't starve to death." Wu Tianhao thought of something and asked impatiently, "Big Brother Ping, do you eat bugs?" "Back on planet Baiji, we used to eat bugs. These are such big bugs." "Bugs? We eat them too, but we eat very little. There aren't many bugs here that can be eaten. They are either too small or too hard to catch. The cost of catching them is high, so we might as well spend the time farming. Here we mainly eat crops that we grow ourselves. Sometimes, we catch some edible ones from the sea to improve our diet, but these situations are rare. As for large land animals, because their numbers are small, they basically don't pose a threat to the base. Most of them are included in the list of protected primo species and can't be eaten. Not only can we not eat them, but we also have to help them if we see them in danger. Thus on our base, we eat vegetables more often. Other times, we drink nutrient solutions to replenish our energy and essential nutrients. Song Ping was telling them all this to tell them that over here, they could forget about eating meat. Since they were here, they had to eat vegetables like everyone else. Zaro rubbed his chin and nodded. "I understand what you mean. In the old era, there was a phrase called, 'Let the dead rest in peace.'" Song Ping. Wu Tianhao was worthy of being the one who had spent the most time with Zaro. Once he heard Zaro's words, he understood what Zaro was trying to say. "What you are trying to say is when in Rome, do as the Romans do, right?" Zaro clapped his hands. "Yes, that's it. Song Ping. I almost fucking doubted my ability to express myself. We can cultivate more crops that are suitable for this place," Midas said. "Find more researchers and we will definitely be able to do it." Song Ping shook his head. "Researchers? We can't hire them. The pay is low, the conditions are poor, the species aren't abundant, and the land isn't fertile enough. We can't attract any research talents. Planet Baiji can still attract quite a number of researchers. In this aspect, we can't compare. Of course, if you guys are willing to help, you can hire more people. They aren't the kind of people who fish for fame. They are truly knowledgeable and capable people. It doesn't matter if they have a bad temper." Song Ping was just making a casual remark. He didn't have any hopes that an entertainment program would really be able to hire those capable researchers. Let me bring you guys into the farm to take a look. Song Ping opened up an area's protective net and brought Feng Zhao and the others in. He didn't forget to talk about Bu Base's advantages. The students who serve here don't need to mine. Even though farming is a little tiring, it is safer than Planet Baiji. Just this point alone makes many conscripts more willing to come here. As he spoke, Song Ping glanced at Feng Zhao.
He had been transferred over from the exploration ship Fomalhaut and had heard that Feng Zhao had applied for the Fomalhaut and Arcturus during his military service.
Unfortunately, he had been rejected. Afterward, Feng Zhao had chosen Planet Baiji, which had harsh conditions for his military service. Afterward, no one had expected that Planet Baiji would discover a high-grade energy or deposit and prosper. Many people knew that Feng Zhao had discovered a new energy or deposit. However, everyone also knew that even without Feng Zhao, other people would have discovered it. It would just have taken slightly longer. Even so, there were still quite a number of people who saw Feng Zhao as a lucky factor. Bu Base's commanding officer, Flemington, had agreed to collaborate with the program team on account of Feng Zhao. Otherwise, Flemington wouldn't have dared to take the risk. Flemington would be promoted after another year or two. He wasn't willing to have any mishaps happen while he was in command. Song Ping didn't just focus on other matters. He introduced the crops here to Feng Zhao and the others. We can't always rely on supplies on such a large planet. Self-reliance is the way to gain a foothold. Only then can we truly stand firm. At the very least, we won't starve to death if an accident occurs with our supplies. We need to control pests in the fields, but insecticides have limited effects. We can't possibly poison ourselves to death just to kill pests. Song Ping brought up a few images for Feng Zhao and the others to see. He introduced the commonly seen pests and animals that harmed crops. Especially these. Song Ping pointed at one of the images and gritted his teeth. These are the most harmful species in the fields. A large part of the reason why production is low is because of them. They can eat a lot. If we aren't careful, they will harm a large area and make everyone's hard work go to waste. The animal that Song Ping was talking about had a long and narrow body with well-developed claws and tail. There were also segments of scales on its body, and a mature one was the size of a palm. These things are highly resistant to drugs and are nimble in the sand. It is very difficult to capture them without the aid of traps. They are a type of organism that gives the base a headache. Fortunately, their toxicity is weak and isn't too dangerous to ordinary people. To protect the crops, we have set up a protective net, but the net isn't always closed. The fields require a large number of people to take care of them. Every time the net is opened, some will sneak in. We also send people to exterminate the pests regularly, but it is basically impossible to clean them all up. They move too quickly in the fields. Even if the exterminators find traces of them, they are worried about harming the crops. Their hands are tied, and exterminating the pests becomes more difficult. Feng Zhao looked at the image. It looks a little like a lizard? It just looks a little similar. Actually, the internal structure is different. There are specimens in the base. I'll show them to you when we get back. If the exterminators catch one next time, I will dissect it for you to see, Song Ping said. Can't we catch it now? Wu Tianhao rubbed his palms together, eager to give it a try. It's not easy to catch. If you want to catch it, you have to get a professional to guide you and use tools. You also can't harm the crops. In any case, catching them isn't as simple as you think. Song Ping had just finished speaking when he saw Curly Hair rush over like the wind, bite something in the soil, drag it out, and smash it a few times. Then he tossed it up, jumped up to catch it, smashed it a few times and tossed it up again. Are you talking about that? Feng Zhao pointed at the thing that was tossed up and asked. Song Ping. Seems like it. Curly Hair held one in his mouth and played with it excitedly. Then, he brought it in front of Feng Zhao as if he was asking for praise. Feng Zhao looked at what Curly Hair was holding in his mouth, then at Song Ping. Chapter 391.
After placing the one he was holding at Feng Zhao's feet, Curly Hair rushed back to the field and brought back another one in the blink of an eye.
Feng Zhao took out a glove and put it on. He picked up the thing by his feet and shook it a few times. It's a little different. Feng Zhao placed the two that Curly Hair had brought back on the ground. Even if these two hadn't been smashed to death by Curly Hair, they were at least half dead. Song Ping was standing guard at the side with some tools. Song Ping wasn't soft-hearted when dealing with pests. Midacy squatted down to observe the new species on the ground curiously. Wu Tianhao watched as Curly Hair went to catch pests again. His hands itched to give it a try. Song Ping saw that everyone was unwilling to give it a try and said, "Go on. Be careful not to step on the crops." Understood. Wu Tianhao specially went to the warehouse and rummaged through it for tools he found useful before rushing over to the field. Zhao followed suit. He took some farming tools that he didn't even know what they were and ran to the fields to join in the fun. Barbara found a stool for herself. After wiping it a dozen times, she sat there elegantly. Going down to the field to catch pests wasn't something a young noble lady like her would do. Half an hour later, Wu Tianhao tumbled a few times and finally caught one with great difficulty. He even destroyed a few crops in the process. Midacy was concerned about the plants in the field. He couldn't move his hands and feet and didn't manage to catch a single one. Zhao didn't care about the plants in the field, but he wasn't as experienced as Wu Tianhao. It looked more like he was being played by pests rather than weeding out pests. Seeing this, Song Ping hurriedly called the others back. If this continued, who knew how many plants would be harmed?
The ones in the field had been planted with great difficulty.
Compared to Wu Tianhao's performance, Song Ping looked at Curly Hair, who was running back with an unknown number of pests in his mouth. If he hadn't tried it himself, Song Ping would have thought that pests were so easy to catch. Wu Tianhao looked at the one he had caught and then at the ones Curly Hair had caught. He had no choice but to admit that he wasn't even comparable to a dog. But looking at Midacy and Zhao, ha 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 ha, they aren't even comparable to me. Wu Tianhao immediately felt comforted. Song Ping looked at Feng Zhao enviously. So powerful, he must be a Muzhou dog. He had been eyeing the working dog breeds bred in Muzhou for a long time. He had heard that they were very impressive. It was a pity that it was too difficult to apply for them here, and they could not compete with those from the big military districts. Ha 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 ha, you guessed wrong.
Wu Tianhao laughed haughtily.
That is a Yenzhou dog. Wu Tianhao stretched out 2 fingers. It's worth 200 million. Song Ping, who had been prepared to borrow Feng Zhao's dog, shuddered and gave up on the idea. He couldn't afford it. What if he accidentally spoils it? How much would that cost?
In less than half an hour, Feng Zhao had laid out a small area on the ground in front of him.
It was filled with the pests that Curly Hair had caught. After picking up another one, Curly Hair didn't run out again. That's all for now. As Feng Zhao spoke, he took advantage of the fact that everyone's attention was on the pests on the ground to quickly shove something that seemed to be the tip of a pest's tail into Curly Hair's mouth. You don't even know how to lick it clean. Song Ping's attention was completely drawn to the pests on the ground. He did not notice Feng Zhao's movements. At this moment, he was both frustrated and happy. These are already not easy. Song Ping wondered if he should award Curly Hair with a Pest Exterminator medal as he watched the creatures that had wreaked havoc on the fields on normal days. Song Ping went to the warehouse to look for tools. He picked out a fat one and dissected it.
He explained its body structure to Feng Zhao and the others and proved that it was because of its body structure that it could move nimbly in the sand.
Under normal circumstances, it was very difficult to catch. Curly Hair was an exception. After dissecting it, Song Ping agreed with Zhao and Wu Tianhao's suggestion to not waste resources and make the best use of them. Song Ping roasted all these pests. There wasn't much meat and it didn't taste good. Eating was secondary. Taking pictures was the main point. Wu Tianhao and the others took many pictures and were waiting to go online to show off on their social media platforms. After that, Song Ping also introduced them to some small factories. Of course, there were definitely more factories on Planet Boo than these. There were still some that couldn't be shown to them. This included many things that Song Ping told them, which might not be completely true. Feng Zhao was well aware of this. For example, The vehicles and other machinery used on the base didn't require petroleum as an energy source. But what about other things? What about the chemical industry? The smell that Zaro had asked about when he had just arrived at the base was related to those. However, Feng Zhao saw that the people of Bu base didn't explain and didn't have any intention of explaining, so Feng Zhao pretended not to know. There were too many confidential things involved. The chemical industry, military, and many other things weren't open to the public. Planet Bu wasn't an exception. Every base was the same. They would only show visitors the most basic things. The rest wasn't something that outsiders could come into contact with. How could the things that Song Ping had shown them be the only things that could protect this planet and be stationed here for a long period of time? What's that? Wu Tianhao's eyes lit up as he pointed at a vehicle parked in a warehouse. It's a vehicle used by the soldiers stationed nearby to transport small goods, Song Ping explained. It looks a little like the dune buggy we used to play at the beach some time ago, right, Zaro? Wu Tianhao asked. It looks a little like it, but it's loaded with weapons. Zaro looked at the equipment on the vehicle and touched the wide wheels. The wheels are different from the ones we used before. It looks even more impressive. Big Brother Ping, what is this vehicle called? From Wu Tianhao's point of view, this sort of vehicle should be named something wild or mighty like Wild Dog, Wild Bull, or T-Rex, right? We call it Little Electric Donkey, Song Ping said. Electric scooter? Little Electric Donkey it is then. Can I try it out? Wu Tianhao rubbed his hands. Sure. There were 5 vehicles in the warehouse. Song Ping locked the weapon systems on the vehicles before letting them use them. Wu Tianhao and Zaro were both veterans. They drove the vehicle out and started running in the desert. After Maitasi consulted Song Ping, he slowly drove the vehicle out of the warehouse. Feng Zhao you. Song Ping watched Maitasi drive off and was about to ask Feng Zhao when he saw Curly Hair jump into the vehicle. You can bring the dog along without any worries? The vehicle didn't have any protective covers. What if the vehicle jolted the dog out? It was 200 million. Feng Zhao glanced at Curly Hair, who was sitting on the cargo seat and wagging his tail, and told Song Ping it's fine, he's not afraid. Song Ping. But I'm afraid. As he watched Feng Zhao drive off, Song Ping felt as though his heart was hanging by a thread. Sighing, Song Ping glanced at the last special guest in the warehouse. Barbara stretched out her hand that had a ring on it, adjusted her flowery sun hat, and put on her sunglasses. She smiled elegantly and said, I'm taking a walk nearby. A young lady from a noble family wouldn't drive such a violent vehicle. Watching Barbara lift her skirt and leave with her bodyguards, Song Ping sighed again and got the soldiers to follow and protect the 5 special guests. Feng Zhao drove out. He didn't race like Wu Tianhao and Zaro. Instead, he maintained a moderate speed and surveyed his surroundings. Further ahead, there wasn't a single plant as far as the eye could see. Gusts of wind blew past, stirring up large amounts of sand. Curly Hair stuck out his tongue and licked the sand playfully. About 20 minutes later, they received a notification from Song Ping. Emergency notification. We have to return. There's a storm approaching. Feng Zhao didn't delay after receiving the notification. He turned the vehicle around and drove back. Zaro and Wu Tianhao had run far away, but because of the high speed of the vehicle, they returned quickly and arrived ahead of Feng Zhao. However, when he stopped the car, Zaro showed off his amazing drifting parking skills. A beautiful arc streaked past, and Song Ping, Barbara, and the others who were standing there were blown up by the sand. Song Ping was fine. He was already used to it. Every time he went out, he would be covered in sand. Barbara couldn't take it anymore. She let out a loud cry and patted the sand off her body. There wasn't any place to change, and she hadn't brought any clean clothes. She looked like she wanted to kill someone. Seeing that a commotion was about to break out, Song Ping hurriedly diverted her attention. The wind is getting stronger. We have to leave quickly. Get in the car. The electric donkey entered the warehouse, and it was locked. The party hurriedly drove off. After driving for a while, Barbara cleaned the dust off her face in front of the mirror and noticed that one of the rings on her hand had fallen. My diamond ring! Barbara shouted. Every accessory Barbara wore was custom-made, and the jewels hanging from them were also expensive. Barbara liked the design of the rings the most. They were all unique. She searched the vehicle anxiously but couldn't find it. It must have fallen off when I was patting the sand off my clothes. It was always on my hand before that.
Barbara glared at Zaro with a murderous look.
Song Ping felt his head hurt even more. The things that this bunch of little ancestors wore weren't cheap. Then should I send someone back to look for it? It was impossible for everyone to turn around and go back to look for it. They could only predict the speed at which the desert's climate changed, but they couldn't be completely accurate. They had always been prepared in advance. What if they went back now and something unexpected happened? Barbara looked at the weather chart on the screen and said with a gloomy face, "No need. Let's return to base first." It was too risky to go back now. She was distressed that she had lost the ring, but she wouldn't let the soldiers risk their lives to help her find it. If I lost it, then I lost it. Zaro will compensate me. Barbara's eyes were cold, and she glared daggers at Zaro. Zaro was so angry that he almost jumped out of his seat. You lost it yourself. What does it have to do with me? Look at who's wearing such fancy clothes and so many accessories. Pretentious. If you didn't have eyes and threw sand all over me, would I have lost my precious ring? Huh. Then it must have been your ring that gave you the chance to slip away. Look, why didn't you lose your other rings? Song Ping was getting a headache from all the bickering. Fortunately, Barbara didn't insist on going back to look for it, and everyone returned safely to base. The two were still bickering after entering the base. How about this? Let's wait for the storm to pass before we go back to look for it, Song Ping said.
Actually, he also knew that in that kind of place, the chances of finding a small ring after the storm had passed were slim to none.
TCH, it's just a small ring. Look at how stingy she is. Zaro's mouth twitched. Diamond ring. The only big diamond ring in the world. Barbara emphasized. Zaro thought of something and changed the topic. The only one in the world, right? Wait. After saying this, Zaro went back to his room for a while, then came out and threw a box at Barbara. Compensation. After throwing the box, Zaro quickly went back to his room and locked the door.
Barbara looked at the box that Zaro had thrown at her warily.
She stood back and let her assistant open it. In the room, her manager asked Zaro curiously, "What's in that box? There's really a diamond ring?"
Zaro looked as if he had gotten his revenge and replied, "Why would she want a big diamond ring?
Just give her a big garlic. And it's planet-wise special garlic, the only one in the world. Even I can't bear to eat it." Manager. Are you courting death? In the rest area for the program team staff. The director was holding a cup of hot tea as he discussed the script with the others. He did not expect these important guests to follow the script completely, nor did he expect to give them any personality settings. He only hoped that they would follow the general outline of the script. Didn't General Renault say so? Let Zaro come over and suffer a little.
Feeling the sandstorm, eating vegetarian for a period, and experiencing the hardships and dull life here was considered tough for this bunch of rich young masters.
How are things over there? The director asked a staff member. Seems okay, the person said, a little weak. What kind of answer is that? If it's okay, then it's okay. If it's not okay, then it's not okay. What do you mean by it seems okay? The director wasn't satisfied with the staff member's perfunctory reply. The staff member didn't argue and showed the director the information he had received today. A series of photos came into view. In the first photo, the 5 special guests were surrounding a simple table, watching Colonel Song Ping dissect a creature on the table. It was said to be a pest in the farmland. In the second photo, the 5 special guests were surrounding a large grill. On top of the grill were pests that had been cleaned up. Even through the photo, one could hear the sizzling sound of oil and the aroma of roasted meat. The program team staff swallowed their saliva after a whole day of vegetarian eating. Further on, there were photos of Zaro and the others racing excitedly in the desert. They even made silly peace signs to the camera. Even the dog beside Feng Zhao happily stuck out its tongue and licked the sand. The program team staff who hadn't fully adapted to the environment and had been cooped up in the base all day. How envious. Is this considered finding joy in hardship? A staff member asked weakly. Director, hee hee. How is it hardship? It really looks like a vacation. Everyone is having so much fun. If this goes on, they won't be able to complete General Renault's mission. Patting the script in his hands, the director regained his confidence. Let them relax first. Starting tomorrow, we will follow the program team's arrangements. Those who can move, move. We will start shooting ahead of schedule. Chapter 392. After Song Ping sent Feng Zhao and the others back to the base, he went to report to Commander Flemington.
Did Feng Zhao hear anything useful?
This was what Flemington was most concerned about.
No, Song Ping replied.
Flemington couldn't help but reveal a disappointed look, but this outcome was within his expectations and he had been mentally prepared. Indeed, the rumors are exaggerated. Flemington sighed and waved his hands. Forget it. Just bring this bunch of people out to have some fun. If they are happy, they will be willing to fork out the money. Were they easy to bring along? Song Ping recalled the performance of the few special guests today and reported truthfully, not bad. Although they are a little spoiled and willful, their character isn't as bad as others say. Zhao and Wu Tianhao were having fun playing with cars and even said they wanted to donate a fleet of cars to us. Haha, that's good. The disappointment in Flemington's heart dissipated. As long as the special guests didn't cause trouble and were willing to donate some things to the base, this collaboration with the program team would be a huge win. Execute Plan A. Flemington's tone was relaxed. When the program team had sought cooperation, Flemington had discussed with the other high-ranking officers of the base and formulated 2 plans. If the guests performed well, they would try their best to cooperate. This was the plan A he had mentioned earlier. If the special guests threw a tantrum and caused trouble, they would be tough and let this bunch of people suffer a little. This was Plan B. From the looks of it, everything was going smoothly. Flemington was naturally willing to take the route of Plan A. This way, the program team could film happily and they could relax. Everyone would get what they needed and it would be a win-win situation. After Song Ping left, Flemington was in a good mood as he browsed through the photos and videos Song Ping had submitted. They were all performances of the 5 special guests today. However, as he browsed through them, Flemington's expression changed. Those neatly spread out like salted fish in the photos were the pests that the base viewed as the hardest to exterminate. Flemington thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him. He rubbed his eyes and enlarged the photos to take a closer look. That's right, those were the pests that had given him a headache. When Song Ping had said that Feng Zhao's dog worth 200 million was an expert at catching pests, Flemington had thought that Song Ping was joking and had used some exaggerated rhetoric. Unexpectedly, the truth was even more exaggerated than the description. Night fell on the base. Sand and dust filled the sky outside. The storm had yet to pass, but it was rather quiet inside the base. There weren't many entertainment facilities in the base, nor were there any rich entertainment activities. They couldn't surf the internet freely, so many people went to bed early. Feng Zhao had gained quite a lot today. After walking around outside, he had some inspiration. After scribbling down a few drafts in his notebook, he lay down to rest. He didn't fall asleep. Instead, he quietly listened to the various sounds. Although the soundproofing of the base was pretty good, as long as Feng Zhao concentrated and listened, he could still hear the various movements of the sandstorm. That was a rhythm that couldn't be created by human beings. It was the rhythm of nature. Wind, sand, rocks, the earth, and the solid barriers created by humans. It was the sound of all living things interacting. All the sounds were divided into musical notes in Feng Zhao's mind, forming a tune unique to Planet Boob. Suddenly, Feng Zhao noticed a small, unfamiliar note that was hard to catch. That sound was so weak that it was like an ant under the feet of a lively crowd. It could be crushed at any moment, but it still struggled and luckily broke through.
The rhythm of the combination of the strong and the weak was like a piece of time that had been measured by the most precise ruler in the world.
It repeated itself tirelessly, like a summoning, but also like a plea. What exactly was that? Just as Feng Zhao was deep in thought, Curly Hair ran over to Feng Zhao's bedside. Feng Zhao opened his eyes and looked at Curly Hair. Curly Hair whimpered softly and stared at Feng Zhao with those seemingly innocent dog eyes. He was so serious that his tail didn't even wag. Curly Hair's behavior meant that he had a request. In the past, when he was at home, that meant that he wanted to play games. But now, Feng Zhao didn't think that Curly Hair had called him in the middle of the night because he wanted to play games. Was he asking for a beating by making a fuss about wanting to play games in the middle of the night? You heard it too? That sound? Feng Zhao asked. He didn't know why, but he had a feeling that Curly Hair had definitely heard that sound. Woof. Curly Hair wagged his tail and spun around on the spot. Then, he ran a few steps towards the door and turned back to look at Feng Zhao. Feng Zhao remained seated on the bedside and didn't move. He was deep in thought. He didn't know what that sound was, but it probably wasn't a threat. If it was any other important information, the base should have been able to catch this signal. If even the base couldn't catch it, but he heard it. Whether it was a blessing or a curse, Feng Zhao himself couldn't be sure. That time on planet Baiji had seemed glorious, but Feng Zhao knew that many people had their eyes on him. Many researchers wanted to study his ears, and he believed that there were definitely people who had discussed how Feng Zhao's body would go if he died of natural or accidental causes. This time, Feng Zhao could completely pretend that nothing had happened and follow the program team and the base's arrangements. He could finish recording this episode and then go back to his life. Seeing that Feng Zhao wasn't moving, Curly Hair ran back and tugged at Feng Zhao's trousers with his paw. Feng Zhao suddenly smiled as he looked at Curly Hair. He got up and put on his clothes, picked up Curly Hair, and patted his head. Hide well. Song Ping was watching Founding Era when he glanced at the time. It was already getting late. He was going to sleep after watching this episode. But before the episode had finished broadcasting, Song Ping received a call from Feng Zhao. Sound? What sound? Wait. Tell me in detail. Song Ping couldn't be bothered with watching his drama and hurriedly asked. His heart was filled with boundless anticipation and nervousness.
Elsewhere, Commander Flemington had just finished handling today's affairs and was in a good mood, so he had rested a little early.
He was sleeping soundly when he was woken up by a phone call. It was rare for him to have a good night's sleep. Flemington's face darkened when he was suddenly woken up. However, he knew that a call at this time would definitely be urgent, so he didn't get angry and quickly answered. What? Flemington was so startled that he tumbled out of bed. That what was so loud that it even sounded like a dialect. On the other end, Song Ping hurriedly said, Feng Zhao said that he heard some sounds, but I asked the relevant professionals about it. They said that they weren't sure what it was and that it might have nothing to do with our base. The equipment also didn't manage to capture it. That's right. What else was there to hope for if the equipment could capture it? Flemington couldn't contain his excitement. Back then, the equipment on planet Baiji had been limited and hadn't been able to detect the ore, but Feng Zhao had heard it. Flemington's breathing became ragged when he thought about the rise of planet Baiji. Ha 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 ha, I never thought that I would have such a day. Wait till the clouds disperse to see the moon. Flemington couldn't be bothered with anything else. He dressed himself as quickly as he could and dashed out of his bedroom. Song Ping led Feng Zhao to Flemington's office. Not long after, Planet Buu's top commander came over with large strides. Ha ha ha! Feng Zhao, I have long heard of your great name. I finally get to meet you today. Flemington was brimming with enthusiasm as he shook Feng Zhao's outstretched hand. The glow in his eyes was as though he had seen his biological father. Song Ping, who was standing at the side, thought to himself, Commander, restrain yourself. Don't scare him away. Flemington didn't care about what others thought and asked Feng Zhao anxiously. You said that you heard a sound that our base's equipment couldn't capture? Was it or? No, Feng Zhao replied. Flemington's mood plummeted like a cliff. Song Ping coughed lightly. Feng Zhao said that it sounded like a sound emitted by some kind of electronic equipment. Electronic equipment. Flemington calmed down. It wasn't emitted by our outpost or any of the surveillance equipment in other locations. It shouldn't be. Song Ping explained, we don't have many outposts here, and the equipment used in the nearby outposts is limited. The base has everything. I let Feng Zhao listen to it, but he said it wasn't. Song Ping wasn't an impulsive person. He wouldn't report it to Flemington before confirming it. If it wasn't the equipment used by our base and outpost. Flemington suppressed the disappointment in his heart and put on a solemn expression. The first thing he thought of was, spy. As though he had guessed what Song Ping and Flemington were thinking, Feng Zhao said, it shouldn't be a spy. It wasn't invasive. Reason? Flemington frowned as he looked at Feng Zhao. Intuition. Feng Zhao replied. Flemington didn't say anything. Curly hair was lying at Feng Zhao's feet. He raised his head and looked at Flemington before looking at Feng Zhao. His pure little eyes seemed as though he didn't understand what they were talking about. Flemington pondered for a bit. Regardless of whether that sound was invasive or not, this matter has to be clarified. Flemington brought up the weather information and asked Feng Zhao, can you tell which direction the sound is coming from? Yes. Feng Zhao pointed in a direction. How far? Flemington asked again. I'm not sure, but it isn't within the range of the base. That sound is still ringing now? Did you hear it last night? Flemington asked again. I didn't hear it last night. It's still ringing now, Feng Zhao replied truthfully. Feng Zhao really hadn't heard it last night. Curly hair hadn't shown any abnormalities either. That sound really hadn't been ringing last night. Of course, it was also possible that the sound was further away and they hadn't heard it. Feng Zhao, help me out tonight. I'll send someone to follow you out of the base to find the source of the sound. The storm outside is starting to weaken. In the direction you pointed out, there shouldn't be any storms that can't be resisted in the next 12 hours. All right. However, the program team will start filming tomorrow, Feng Zhao said. Don't worry. I'll settle it. Flemington made the arrangements. After some thought, he decided to personally follow Feng Zhao out. He couldn't sit still at the base. Regardless of whether it was good or bad, he had to get to the bottom of it. The efficiency of the base was very high. Flemington quickly mobilized manpower, vehicles, and flying transports to bring Feng Zhao out of the base. A group of people headed in the direction Feng Zhao had pointed out. At the base, Barbara was currently painting her nails. She had messed up the pattern on her nails from today's trip out. Due to Barbara's high standards of perfection, she had spent 2 to 3 hours to get her nails cleaned and manicured. Only a little bit was left. Barbara still had some artistic cells and had personally designed the pattern for her maid to draw. She had originally wanted to embed a diamond, but when she thought about the diamond ring she had lost today, she changed her plans. At the same time, she was thinking about how she would take revenge on Zaro tomorrow. For example, scamming him of 100 million first? As she was thinking, a bodyguard who had followed her to Planet Boo rushed over and whispered a few words to Barbara. Barbara's fingers trembled, and the almost completed pattern on her nails was instantly ruined. The maid trembled at the side and hung her head, not daring to make a sound. However, this time, Barbara didn't pay attention to her nails. She only asked that bodyguard in a deep voice, "Is the news true?" "It's true. Flemington has already brought Feng Zhao out of the base." "Follow them." "Yes. I'll send someone to secretly follow them." Barbara raised her chin. "No need. Go directly. I'll personally bring someone to follow them." "It's too dangerous. Won't Flemington make a move on us outside?" a bodyguard asked worriedly. "They wouldn't dare." Barbara didn't have any intention of continuing to explain. She arranged for someone to rent a car from the base and called over another bodyguard. "Send a message to Zaro's side and let him know what Feng Zhao heard. Flemington is currently bringing him out to search for it." "What about the others? Do we also need to divulge it?" that bodyguard asked. "No need. If Zaro knows, the other two will know too," Barbara said with certainty. On Zaro's side, Zaro's mind was filled with thoughts on how to complain to his grandfather. After he finished his draft, he wrote an email and set it to be sent automatically after internet access. Zaro's agent was so worried that he couldn't sleep. He was thinking about how to face Barbara's wrath tomorrow. An accompanying bodyguard rushed in and informed Zaro of the news he had just received. Really? Zaro was pleasantly surprised.
He had been engrossed in writing the letter just now, and hadn't had the time to change his tone from acting like a spoiled child to the Lijo governor.
The news is true. Good. Zaro tossed aside the matter of how to more effectively swindle his father, and immediately called Wu Tianhao over to conspire. It wasn't some brotherly loyalty, and Zaro wasn't as thorough in his analysis as Barbara, but he knew that roping in one more person meant an extra layer of protection. It was just like finding someone to share the burden when you got into trouble. Even if you got beaten up in the end, you definitely wouldn't be the only one suffering. Could it be that he discovered another or? This was Zaro's first thought. Shouldn't be. This planet doesn't seem to have any energy ores. Even if there were, there wouldn't be a lot, and the grade wouldn't be too high. There's no value in mining it, Wu Tianhao said. Could it be aliens? Zaro guessed. To be precise, to the natives, we are the aliens, Wu Tianhao retorted. Then it must be something else important. I know that fellow Feng Zhao. Even though he isn't as handsome as me, his ears are simply sharper than a dog's. What he heard might be some earth-shattering thing. We can't miss it. Zaro was afraid that Wu Tianhao would cower. Wu Tianhao didn't cower. He was analyzing the pros and cons, and his train of thought overlapped with Zaro's.
After the conspiracy, he realized that the pressure on the two of them was too great.
Thus, he called over Mitasi, who was about to head to the sports room to play basketball.
When Mitasi heard what the two of them were talking about, he was stunned for a moment. He passed the racket in his hands to a bodyguard and quietly made a hand signal. The bodyguard took the racket and left for a while. When he returned, he whispered something to Mitasi. Following that, Mitasi joined Zaro and Wu Tianhao's conspiracy. Why don't we first sneak? Just as they started talking, the three of them found out that Barbara had just brought people out of the base with great fanfare. The three of them. Sneak what? Hurry up and bring people out. The three of them didn't delay. Like Barbara, they rented cars and flying transports from the base and brought people out. In the rest area of the program team, the director was engrossed in the script. He had just discussed it with the scriptwriter and added a few highlights that he felt would be very topical to make the program script even more perfect. Full marks. A stroke of genius. The plot was breathtaking, full of ups and downs, gripping the heart. With such a script and 5 high-level special guests, there was no need to worry that the program wouldn't be able to make a comeback. Calling over a few other program team members who were also so excited that they couldn't sleep, the director had victory in his hands. This time, we will surely soar to the skies. The other program team members also had dreamy looks on their faces. Promotions and raises were right before their eyes. Let's wait until tomorrow. We will first. The director, who had a confident smile on his face, hadn't even finished speaking when he received a notification from Bubase's military. The program's recording would be delayed and they would be borrowing a special guest. Director. Angry. The director didn't know the reason why Feng Zhao had been borrowed by the military. However, he felt that he should first appease the other special guests. Perhaps they had some grievances? The director gave Zaro's agent a call. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, he heard the whistling of the wind and the sound of a fleet of vehicles driving over the desert.
He also heard Zaro's and Wu Tianhao's excited cries. Director. Chapter 393. On the sand, a convoy was moving. There were also several flying transports in the air. The storm in the desert had not stopped, but it was clearly weakening. Flemington looked at the weather information sent over and saw Feng Zhao staring out the window. He thought that Feng Zhao was worried about the storm outside and said, "This wave has already passed. It will rapidly weaken in the future. This level isn't enough to threaten us. We can still go out on missions in such weather." Feng Zhao, who was carrying curly hair in the back seat, smiled when he heard Flemington's words and didn't bother to explain. He was not worried about the storm, which was not enough to threaten the convoy. He was trying to figure out what the voice was. Now that he was getting closer to the voice, he could hear it more clearly. Feng Zhao had no way of explaining to the others that he could hear the call and cry for help in the voice. Even he himself did not understand why he could hear these things. Is it really in this direction? Flemington stared at the map and the route of the convoy with a doubtful expression. Yes, Feng Zhao affirmed. Flemington's frown deepened, but he didn't order the convoy to slow down. How much farther? Asked Flemington. Given our current speed, we can reach in half an hour, Feng Zhao replied. If the direction is correct, we'll arrive at the outer region in half an hour. The so-called outer region was just a relative term. The area where the base was located, as well as the areas with frequent patrols and surveillance equipment, all belonged to the inner region. The area outside the inner region was the outer region. In layman's terms, it was a place that the base's military didn't understand and wouldn't normally go to. The sand dunes in that area change quickly, and there's also quicksand. We have to be careful. Flemington picked up the communication device and got everyone to follow the first car. The lead car was very big, but there were not many people in it. There were all kinds of equipment on it that allowed the car to avoid dangerous areas. Commander, someone is following us. An officer briefed Flemington on the matters at the base and the people following them. Flemington let out a long sigh. He knew that he couldn't hide it from those people. They were the descendants of the great general, after all. Did they really think that those superclans nurtured fools? Furthermore, even if they managed to hide it from Zaro and the others, there would still be people from the base who would send them the news. Bu Base wasn't Flemington's base alone. Feng Zhao was too strange. With the incident on planet Baiji as a precedent, everyone else was very sharp this time around. After pondering for a short while, Flemington said, "Contact the vehicles behind and let them return to the base. If you can't persuade him, then forget it." At the very least, they had to show their attitude. If something really happened, he did try to persuade them, but the people behind him insisted on following. After the call ended, Flemington smiled and patted Feng Zhao's shoulder. "If we can discover anything important this time, I will definitely help you apply for military merits. Maybe your reserve duty rank can be raised again." Although that was the case, it was impossible to be promoted to the rank of reserve duty if one didn't have a particularly significant contribution and influence. Many people in the military had earned merits through hard work before they could be promoted. Feng Zhao had already retired from active duty. In the past, there had been no such thing as a promotion for reserve duty soldiers. A few years ago, new regulations had been introduced to stimulate the enthusiasm of reserve duty soldiers. If someone like Feng Zhao, who hadn't retired from reserve duty and was able to earn great merits, he might really be able to get promoted. The premise was that they had to make great contributions and influence. Following closely behind the convoy. Is it really all right to follow them like this? After all, this is the base military and we aren't familiar with them. Will they forcefully stop us? Midasi asked worriedly. Definitely not. Even if they object, we can donate a few more things. I will add another truck of garlic. Right now, Zaro didn't want to consider how the base military would stop them. He just wanted to know what Feng Zhao had discovered and what he would do next. He was about to be bored to death. Hearing that Zaro was donating garlic, Midasi scratched his head. This isn't too good, right? Why isn't it good? What's wrong with garlic? Are you looking down on garlic? Do you know how valuable agricultural products are now? Furthermore, garlic is even rarer in this poor and broken down place. Midasi thought about it and agreed. Ordinarily, the soldiers stationed at the base couldn't afford garlic. There was a limit to the variety of seasonings in the canteen's dishes. The more extravagant seasonings were locally produced. The taste wasn't that great, but it was fine as long as it was edible. This place wasn't picky. If you couldn't eat it, you would go hungry. With Zaro's garlic donation, the soldiers' livelihoods would improve. Then I will donate a gymnasium. The base's gymnasium isn't built properly, Midasi said. Wu Tianhao wasn't willing to fall behind. I wonder if they want a martial arts center. 15 minutes later. In the convoy at the front, Flemington received an excited report from his subordinate. "We received a signal." Flemington nearly shot up from his seat. The hand holding the communications device was trembling. Feng Zhao's ears hadn't heard wrongly. "Have you confirmed the source of the signal?" "An unfamiliar signal. Although it is very weak and we aren't sure what it is, the signal gets stronger the further we go. It should be the place Feng Zhao mentioned." "We haven't set up any monitoring devices in the vicinity. It can't be a signal from our equipment." "Very good. Continue analyzing the source of the signal and find out what it is." The troops increase their speed. "No, maintain their original speed. We must be cautious. All of you, stay alert." Flemington roared. Flemington couldn't be bothered with Feng Zhao now. After the call ended, he immediately contacted the base and made arrangements. Although Feng Zhao had said that the signal wasn't threatening, Flemington didn't dare take the risk. The base had arranged for people to be on standby at all times. They didn't need Feng Zhao's directions anymore. The troops' signal receivers had already captured the signal. When the signal became clear, the troops had arrived at their destination. Flemington looked at the map, then at the sand not far away. He pointed ahead. "It's here. Redo the scan." Deep scan. Flemington wished he could immediately dig out whatever was beneath the sand, but the signal source was buried too deep. They didn't understand this region, so they wanted to see if the foundation was stable and if there was any quicksand. While the surveying personnel were busy, Feng Zhao was also looking in that direction. The map that Flemington had given him indicated that the large area in front was like a huge pit. The pit was filled with sand. If the sand was replaced with water, it would be a huge lake with a depth of over 100 meters. The signal source was at the bottom of the pit. Back then, when Bu Base had been established, preliminary global surveys had been conducted. This region was only 100 meters deep, and it wasn't given any more attention after being classified as the outer region. Detectors couldn't be installed, and even if they were installed, they would be buried by the sand after a few days. Bu Base was poor and couldn't afford such losses. Thus, there wasn't a single monitoring station or outpost in this region. Seeing Feng Zhao bring the dog out of the car, Flemington reminded him, "Keep the leash on. Don't lose the dog. It's still fine at night, but don't let it out after daybreak. This dog has thick fur and is afraid of the heat. Let it stay in the car." 200 million. Feng Zhao still wanted to borrow the dog to catch pests. "Don't let the dog get sick." Feng Zhao acknowledged and led Curly Hair around the newly marked safe zone. Curly Hair was very excited. He sniffed around the sand and then dug frantically. Flemington chuckled when he saw this. "This little stubby leg is rather strong." Before he could finish speaking, Flemington's smile vanished, and he stared fixedly at the pit Curly Hair was digging. A dog's sense of smell was more sensitive than a human's. It was said that this dog worth 200 million had an extraordinary sense of smell. Could it have discovered something? Half a minute later, an animal that looked like a sand lizard was picked up and tossed around by Curly Hair. Flemington. Disappointment. After a while, Flemington sensed some activity from that side and looked over unwillingly. Curly Hair had dragged out another animal. Flemington. He silently retracted his gaze. This was the third time. Flemington no longer harbored any hope. When he looked over, he saw Feng Zhao squatting down and picking up something from the pit Curly Hair had dug. The reflected light made Flemington squint his eyes, but they immediately widened and he quickly walked over. "What did you discover?" "A piece of metal." Feng Zhao handed over the piece of metal that he had dug out. The piece of metal wasn't even half the size of a palm and seemed to be the wreckage of a flying transport or something else. After it was sent for analysis, the conclusion was that these wreckage had existed even longer than Bu Base. This also meant that these wreckage had been buried here long before Bu Base had even been established. "Commander, the results of this region's survey are out." A technician transmitted the results of this region's survey over. Flemington quickly read through the survey results. Every muscle on his face was filled with excitement as he pointed at the huge sand pit in front.
Dig.
In the past, he had been so poor that he hated that he couldn't split a single cent to spend. Now, Flemington, who had originally intended to take the conservative route, decided to be bold and give it a try. He thought about Planet Baiji and Planet Y. All the bases that were originally at the back of the development sequence had developed. If there was a chance to change Planet Boo, who wouldn't be willing? Even if the changes weren't huge, it would be good to create some news and attract some attention. Of course, if there were others who were willing to help share the burden, Flemington was also willing. For example, those special guests at the back. Just as he mentioned those special guests, Zaro and his party also arrived. After finding out that there was something beneath this huge sand pit, Zaro's imagination ran wild. Another batch of equipment was delivered by flying transport from the base. Flemington got people to distribute those handheld metal detectors. Those who weren't participating in the excavation mission at the huge pit were to look around for any wreckage that was buried too shallow. The more they dug, the more information they would obtain. Their base was poor and their equipment was outdated. Some things still had to rely on manpower, so Flemington transferred over another team from the base. The sky gradually brightened, and the temperature clearly rose. Zaro and the others also came over to ask for a few detectors to play with. "Give me one. I will do it myself."
Me too. Me too.
Zaro couldn't take it anymore after searching for quite a while and didn't find anything. He glanced around.
What is that?
Zaro saw some white granules. Barbara, Wu Tianhao, and Midasi heard the commotion and came over. He carefully pinched a granule with his fingers and twisted it forcefully, turning it into powder. Zaro had a look of astonishment on his face. Is this some kind of desert specialty salt? A base soldier at the side had an embarrassed look on his face. This is some kind of desert specialty shit. Not far away, a few peculiar-looking creatures poked their heads out from the sand. Seeing that people were paying attention to them, they quickly burrowed back into the sand. Curly Hair, who was being led by Feng Zhao, twitched his nose and took 2 steps towards Zaro and the others before being pushed back by Feng Zhao. Let them dig the rest themselves. Chapter 394. Wu Tianhao laughed heartily at Zaro. Zaro's face stiffened as he dusted off the white powder on his hands. Barbara, who was beside him, had already avoided him like the plague. Midasi held back his laughter. When he saw Colonel Song Ping, he ran over to borrow some digging equipment and mentioned the matter of donations they had discussed on the way here. Song Ping was delighted. Whether it was garlic, a dojo, or a gymnasium, they all wanted it. When Feng Zhao heard this, he also said, "I will also join in. What else does the base lack?" Song Ping thought for a bit, coughed lightly, and said somewhat embarrassedly, "Why don't you donate to a KTV?" He wasn't bragging, but when it came to singing military songs, no one on Bu base would dare claim to be first if he claimed to be second. It was a pity there wasn't a place to showcase it.
Feng Zhao.
It's fine if it gets approved. As they were speaking, Curly Hair, who had been shoved into the tent by Feng Zhao, stuck his head out and stared at Zaro. Zaro, who had just been mocked by Wu Tianhao, twitched his mouth and stood up. He switched on his detector and was about to change locations when he heard a sharp beeping sound. The few people who had been avoiding all turned to look in Zaro's direction. Zaro moved his detector. There's something under the sand. Hey, what are you doing? Shoving aside Wu Tianhao, who had run over to dig, Zaro pointed at 2 bodyguards. Right here.
Dig.
After daybreak, the temperature rose rapidly. Everyone's faces were covered in sweat, but they were still in good spirits and didn't hide in their tents. The bodyguards propped up their umbrellas. Zaro stood under the umbrellas, drank a cup of water, wiped his face, and stared at the 2 bodyguards digging. This was the metal piece he had detected. When the time came, he would bring it back as a souvenir to show off. The excavation work on Flemington's side had already started for some time, and they had discovered some metal pieces. Although they had been there for a long time, they didn't show any signs of corrosion. Based on the analysis of these metal pieces, the technicians deduced that they were probably from a spaceship or exploration ship. The material was similar to that of the Arcturus and other exploration ships. When Zaro discovered the metal piece, it didn't attract Flemington's attention. Now, Flemington's main focus was on the sand pit. The two bodyguards dug away the top layer of sand and revealed some curled metal pieces. One of the bodyguards had intended to use his strength to pull out the remaining parts buried in the sand, but he was interrupted by Zaro. "Be careful, be careful." Zaro blocked the bodyguard who was excavating the metal pieces. "I've seen archaeological films. You have to use a brush to brush away the sand bit by bit, then blow gently." As he spoke, Zaro pouted as he lay there. Before he could finish exhaling, a gust of wind slapped his face with sand. He awkwardly wiped his face. The sand and sweat had turned into muddy water, and his face was all messed up. Zaro immediately lost his patience and directly pulled out the metal piece from the sand. "There seems to be words." Zaro brushed off the sand on the metal sheet and carefully blew on it. This time, he paid attention to the direction of the wind so that it didn't get stuck on his face. The rest of the words on the metal plate had been damaged and blurred, and it was impossible to see what it was. Fortunately, the small piece in the middle was slightly clearer. Zaro flipped the metal piece up and down. "This should be straight. This letter is N." Midas came over to take a look. "It looks like Eta. The right part is obviously longer." Zaro: "Oh? Really? No wonder I felt something was wrong." Before he could finish speaking, Barbara rushed over to snatch the metal piece and kicked Zaro to the side. Zaro was furious after being kicked. He rolled up his sleeves and was about to retaliate when he was stopped by Mitasi. "Babla, did you recognize him?" Mitasi stopped Zaro and asked. Barbara's reaction was too big. It was completely different from her usual aristocratic and virtuous demeanor. She even flung her fan to the side. There weren't many situations that could cause Barbara to lose her persona. Mitasi, who simply hadn't seen any useful information, waited for her to give an answer. Hearing Mitasi's words, Zaro stared blankly and also looked over. Seeing Barbara's sparkling eyes, Zaro shivered. Had this unreasonable spirit gone crazy? There was still a lot of sand on the metal piece. Touching it would result in a layer of dust. At this moment, Barbara couldn't care less about her misophobia. She gripped it tightly with both hands and stared at the metal piece with an expression of shock, passion, infatuation, and madness. It was as though she had seen a 200-kilogram diamond. Alcade. ATUP character imprint. It's definitely the Alcade. What? At some point, Flemington, who had walked over, spoke in a different tone. He didn't dare believe his ears. His heart had trembled the moment he heard the words, Alcade. Mitasi, who had his ears perked up, also heard it. He was equally shocked. "Don't tell me what's buried in the sand pit is one of the 7 spaceships of the legendary Dream Team, the Alcade. Didn't they say that the Alcade had been destroyed during the initial exploration?" Flemington took a deep breath. "We lost contact with the Alcade. It's just that we haven't found any traces of it in all these years. Therefore, some people guess that it encountered a cosmic storm and was destroyed, vanishing from the universe." Zaro Slacker Luo was at a loss. "What's the Alcade? There's such a spaceship?" His agent explained to him from the side. Many people knew about the Sirius. It was one of the pioneers of human space exploration in the new era. It represented an era. And before the Sirius, there was a group of exploration teams at the Elder level. They were formed of 7 unmanned spaceships, named after the Big Dipper. The dream team of exploration teams at the Elder level. They carried the peak intelligence of that era. Barbara's scorching gaze shifted from the metal plate in her hand to the sand pit that was currently being excavated. The Alcade, serial number Eta, lost contact during an exploration mission. For the sake of finding the Alcade, the Interplanetary Fund has offered a bounty of 100 billion. 100 billion. To the vast majority of people,
This was an astronomical figure. Everyone's eyes lit up with a blaze. The founder of the Dream Team was the founder of the Interplanetary Fund. The initial bounty was 10 billion. As the years passed, the Interplanetary Fund's managers changed generation after generation, but they never withdrew the bounty on the Alcade. In fact, the bounty was constantly increasing. After 400 years, the bounty had reached a level that even someone like Barbara, who was born into a super-rich family, would go crazy. Over the past 400 years, as humanity ventured into outer space, many adventurers had attempted to find the Alcade, only to return in disappointment. Regardless of whether it was Flemington or Song Ping, they were the same as many people who had served on other planets. They had all dreamed of finding the Alcade, but they had all been jolted awake by reality. After 400 years, many people only treated the Alcade mission, which had occupied the top spot on the bounty list for 400 years, as a topic of idle conversation. If the Interplanetary Fund didn't really expect to find the Alcade, that's why they increased the bounty so much. Who could have expected that after 400 years, traces of the Alcade would really be found? If we really dig up the Alcade, will the Interplanetary Fund go back on their word? Wu Tianhao asked. Definitely not. That's the Interplanetary Fund we're talking about. Barbara retorted. It didn't matter if the Interplanetary Fund went back on their word. If they really dug up the Alcade, the Interplanetary Fund definitely wouldn't go back on their word. She wanted a share of the profits from this Alcade mission. No matter what, the Interplanetary Fund's bounty had never been faked. Whatever they said, it was whatever it was. There wouldn't be a single cent missing. There wouldn't be payment in installments either. If they said 100 billion, then 100 billion would be 100 billion. So what if they regretted it? Not allowed. Definitely not allowed. Not a single cent missing. Flemington was grinning so widely that his mouth was about to split open. He wished he could float into space. 100 billion. Even if they couldn't claim all of it, their boo base would definitely claim the majority. Even if they couldn't apply for next year's military budget, the Interplanetary Fund's bounty would be enough for them to use. The spaceport had to be upgraded. The base could be expanded. Yes, they still had to hire some agronomists with high salaries. The equipment of the soldiers had to be changed from inside to out. And they had to buy 10 more fleets. Flemington had already started to consider how to spend the bounty. The news of the Alcade also made the base team that was carrying out the excavation mission extremely excited. Feng Zhao was much calmer compared to the craziness of the others. He recalled the information he had previously obtained. There was very little information on the internet regarding the 7 first-generation interstellar exploration spaceships. All he knew was that the 7 spaceships of the Dream Team were the most technologically advanced batch. The Sirius at the back belonged to the younger generation. The other exploratory spaceships and spaceships at the back belonged to the younger generation. Most technological products would probably only have some value as a collector's item and would be displayed in a museum or on display. It was reasonable to say that after so many years had passed, science and technology were constantly advancing. Spaceships and warships had already been upgraded several times. Even if a spaceship from that era was discovered, it wouldn't make people go crazy over it. However, everyone's reaction was like an archaeological team from the old era discovering a majestic imperial tomb. The 7 spaceships of the Dream Team that could make the Interplanetary Fund offer a bounty of 100 billion probably weren't simple. Furthermore, Feng Zhao was more concerned about the top-notch intelligence of that era that they had mentioned. Flemington also didn't care about what Feng Zhao thought. He prepared to report the situation to his superiors while instructing people to continue excavating. As for Zaro and the others, Flemington demarcated a few areas for them to play at the side. Zaro and the others weren't willing to stay idle at the side and asked Flemington for some excavating machinery. Midas's agent, LVXIN, was currently taking photos of the busy Midas. Zaro glanced over and said to his own agent, who was drinking water, "Look at other people's agents. Be more self-aware." Zaro's agent, who had been filming for over 3 hours and had just taken a break. "Did I fucking film a dog just now?" After taking a few photos, Zaro started excavating with the machine. He felt that he was doing an arduous mission with historical significance. He felt a special sense of mission. Zaro decided that he would write a travel book when he returned,
Those days I operated an excavator on Planet Boop. Chapter 395. Huangzhou, Interplanetary Fund Headquarters. After Flemington reported the matter of the Alcade, he also contacted them. The council held an emergency meeting. Looking at the wreckage, it does look like the missing Alcade. The ATUP mark is the same as what was recorded in the files. It's just a suspicion now. I'm not sure. Should we send someone over? Flemington's intention is to see if our bounty is still valid. They are eyeing the 100 billion bounty. With such a huge sum of money, unless the board of directors made a decision, other junior leaders would not be able to touch it. The bounty is not a small amount, sigh. I didn't expect to find the Alcade. Who discovered it? People from Bu Base? According to Flemington, it was Feng Zhao who heard the commotion. Then, he mobilized a team of people to follow the sound and find some clues. Tisk, look at the markings on the map. The distance isn't close. How do Feng Zhao's ears grow? As expected of the ears that even the Academy of Sciences is concerned about. Let's put Feng Zhao's matter aside for now. Let's discuss what we should do. In the conference room, all the directors spoke one after another. It was not that they were being perfunctory, but that each of them had their own insistent opinions. The debate was rather intense. The chairman, who was sitting at the head of the table, frowned more and more. He raised his hand and was about to slam the table when his communicator rang. Then the directors in the meeting room realized that the chairman, who had been acting like a big boss just a moment ago, immediately acted like a grandson when he answered the phone. He even had a respectful smile on his face. The people who were arguing also shut up. Since the chairman had such a reaction, they didn't dare to make any noise. They all sat up straight like primary school students in class. She suddenly became obedient. The chairman bowed slightly. Yes, yes, yes. I'll arrange it right away. Yes. Don't worry. I will personally keep an eye on it. After the call ended, the chairman's face instantly reverted to its previous dignified look. He said in a deep voice, "Make the excavation of the Alcade our #1 mission. Immediately arrange for someone to head to Planet Bu to take over the excavation work." The others didn't ask for the reason and responded in unison. Since there was a notice from above, it was basically confirmed that the Alcade was buried there. Then, what about the bounty? Someone asked. The chairman gritted his teeth. Here. Once I dig out the Alcade, I'll transfer the money immediately. Full payment. While the Interplanetary Fund was making its move, the General Administration of Aeronautics and Astronautics didn't lag behind and also dispatched people to Planet Bu. Because the Alcade had not been excavated, the news was kept secret and not made public. The public did not know about it either. The netizens were all discussing how the variety show Up Close Contact would make a comeback. Previously, during the high-profile publicity, everyone in the production team was full of confidence. And this time, the invited guests all brought their own topics and traffic. The production team should have started filming by now, right? The officials didn't release any news. In the past, they would release a few photos. Why is there nothing this time? It's all a ploy. They're purposely trying to cover it up and keep it mysterious. Maybe he's still holding back some big move. Director, come out and say something. At Bu Base, the program team's director, who was completely unaware of the netizens' summons, had a faint smile on his face as he read through the script. Then, he held a pep rally for the staff to rouse their spirits and get ready to go all out. Then, he received a notification from the base. Due to a temporary mission, the collaboration would be postponed. Director. He started to panic. The director immediately contacted a few guests to discuss the filming of the show. Feng Zhao did not object, but the other 4 special guests applied for leave at the last minute. When the director received the reply, He was speechless. Heartbroken. Irritable. He wanted to curse. The base changed its mind and refused to cooperate. The special guests found excuses to go on strike. What about the godly script that I spent the entire night sorting out? Compensation? No amount of compensation can make up for the damage done to me.
The director fumed as he flipped through the contract and was about to find someone to tear it up when he was stunned by the news about the Alcade.
Alcade?
One of the spaceships known as the Dream Team from 400 years ago?
An indescribable glint flickered in the director's eyes. Only 2 of the 7 senior spaceships from back then were left. One was in the Space Museum, and the other was in a top-secret research institute. The rest had been destroyed during their missions due to various accidents. The Alcade was a special technological relic from that era. If it was really discovered, it would surely have extraordinary significance. No wonder Boo Base changed its mind at the last minute. No wonder the special guests weren't in the mood to film the show. This was also an opportunity.
After looking at the meticulously prepared script and pondering for 5 minutes, the director's wavering heart finally settled down.
Let's go too. Change the script. This episode will revolve around the Alcade.
The scriptwriter didn't understand.
Director, we are doing a poverty alleviation reality variety show. Speaking of which, the majority of the show is still entertainment and not archaeology. This doesn't match our temperament. However, the director had already made his choice and didn't intend to change it. In our position, we must know how to innovate when making a show. We must keep up with current events and grasp the main points. Furthermore, if we don't change it and still follow the previous plan, who knows when we will be able to film? Everyone in the program team nodded in unison. Makes sense. In the end, they were still forced to do this. The director didn't want to study the thoughts of others and called for the staff to follow. Indeed, after the director changed the plan, Zaro and the others also agreed to cooperate. In any case, they had to guard the sandpit. It wasn't a bad idea to record the show here. Zaro hugged the piece of metal with the ATIB imprint that he had personally dug out and carefully rubbed it.
He was about to kiss it in his delight, but he gave up when he thought that it had been buried in the sand and rubbed by feces.
Zaro got his assistant to prepare an exquisite box, and Zaro placed the metal piece inside. He even printed out a few photos and placed them in the box. He got people from the base to help bring them back to Earth. Today, Flemington had already arranged for people to bring the excavated metal piece back to Earth and hand it over to the Aerospace General Headquarters and the Interplanetary Fund for research. Zaro asked them to help send a delivery. Inside the box was a handwritten letter. Besides sharing the Alcade's excavation information with the Lijo governor, Zaro had also lodged a complaint against his father. Not long after, the Lijo governor was very happy to receive this souvenir with a special meaning. On the back of the first photo was a few crooked words written by Zaro. I dug it out. Looking at the other photos of Zaro driving the excavator with a face full of sand and dust, the Lijo governor's grandfatherly love for his grandson rapidly swelled. He turned around and helped his grandson beat his son. He didn't feel any psychological burden when doing such things. Elsewhere, personnel from the Interplanetary Fund and Aerospace General Headquarters had already arrived on Planet Boo and completed the handover of the mission to the base army. This time, the equipment brought over by the Interplanetary Fund and Aerospace General Headquarters was much more advanced. The excavation speed wasn't something the old and worn-out machinery on Boo Base could compare to. The signal emitted from the sand pit lasted for 12 hours before stopping. According to Feng Zhao's conjecture, the signal was emitted every once in a while and would last for 12 hours each time. Although the signal couldn't be received, the location had already been determined, and it wouldn't affect the excavation work. Following the arrival of personnel from the Interplanetary Fund and Aerospace General Headquarters, a sturdy fort and many resting quarters had already been built near the sandpit. The program team had also moved here to make it more convenient for the program recording. Flemington looked at the situation and decided to convert this place into a second base after this group of people left. Such good construction resources had to be fully utilized and couldn't be wasted.
As the commanding officer of the base, Flemington was in a rather good mood as he thought about the bounty he was about to receive and the plans for a second base. After the handover, the base army would be excluded from the excavation mission. However, Flemington wasn't worried at all. Their base was only waiting to receive the money. The Interplanetary Fund's chairman had already replied and agreed to transfer the funds once the Alcade was excavated. As for how the bounty would be distributed, it would be up to them to discuss. Where's Feng Zhao? Flemington searched the vicinity of the sandpit but didn't see any trace of Feng Zhao. He just finished recording the program. I think he ran over there. Song Ping pointed in a direction. He has bodyguards following him and has the map we gave him. There aren't any storms in this area recently. As long as he doesn't run out of the safe zone, he should be fine. All right, I got it. By the time Flemington finished handling his matters, it was already very late. Feng Zhao was searching for inspiration a kilometer away from the sandpit. Above him was the mysterious and enchanting sea of stars. Beneath his feet was the dried-up sand that nurtured life. The starry sky and the boundless desert formed a dreamy note. A long time ago, he had also sat on the sand in a certain region. It was just that at that time, he hadn't been able to see the resplendent starry sky and it hadn't been this peaceful. This was a familiar yet novel feeling. The surroundings were very dark. There were no lights. Looking into the distance, he opened up his notebook and wrote symbols one by one. Feng Zhao wrote very smoothly. By the time Flemington came looking for him, he had already finished the first draft. Flemington had looked for Feng Zhao to discuss the distribution of the bounty. You were the first to hear the signal this time, but without our base troops, you wouldn't have found this place. Zaro is also clamoring for a share. Let's find a time to sit down and have a chat. No matter what, you will surely receive quite a bit this time. If you don't know how to use so much money, why not use it to support Planet Boo's development? Flemington said casually. All right. I was just joking. Flemington suddenly stuttered. I wasn't joking. Feng Zhao's tone was calm but serious. Cuff. I'm sorry about that. Ha ha ha, it's settled then. Thank you in advance. Flemington sighed in his heart. Feng Zhao was really a good kid. However, even though Feng Zhao had said this, Flemington also felt bad about taking advantage of him. Thus, he became a little more sincere. Planet Boo doesn't have resources like Planet Baiji and Planet Y. This place is barren, very poor, and very tough. The restrictions on the conditions make the base's personnel highly mobile. I will also be transferred in 2 years. Before I leave, I hope that I can build up the base a little better and let the soldiers stationed here have a better life. I feel heartache for my own soldiers. I have to fight for more resources for them before I leave. Not necessarily. What? Planet Boo also has its own advantages. Feng Zhao chuckled. Flemington thought that Feng Zhao was consoling him and also chuckled. What advantages does Planet Boo have? After Flemington left, Feng Zhao gazed at the desert under the night sky. He hadn't lied to Flemington just now. Planet Boo really had its own opportunities. Yesterday, he had unintentionally overheard people from the Spaceflight General Headquarters talking in low voices. In the future, Planet Boo might very well become another strategic military location. Perhaps it might even become a new base for technological tourism. What a cliché! Apologies for being late. See you tomorrow. Tweet a new article, History's Divine Manners, Dragon Riding Son-in-Law. Zhang Shou had transmigrated for 3 years and grown up in the countryside with a mother but no father. Just as Zhang Shou was peacefully farming and teaching, a group of carriages paid a visit one day and brought him a fiancée. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.